Chapter 659. A few days after Ren Baqin returned to Dayo, he finally saw the egg-kicking maniac, Li Fu. He looked the same as before and didn't seem to be in dire straits. He wasn't missing an arm or a leg. It seemed like his first parachute jump was a success, and the Empress's advancement to the third most powerful expert in the world had to be delayed. Li Fu was also riding a Heilangjun, a wild boar that was 3 to 4 meters tall. It was covered in short, grayish-brown hair and emitted energy waves that weren't weaker than an earthwheel expert. With this kind of strength, Heilangjun could be considered an overlord in the forest. No animals dared to provoke it, and beasts of the same level had to avoid it. However, this fellow was a little miserable at the moment. His fangs were broken in half, his 2 small eyes were of different sizes, and there was a bump on his forehead. The hair on the back of his neck had also been pulled out, making him look miserable. However, his ferocity didn't diminish at all, and his eyes glowed fiercely at everyone he saw. Then Li Fu punched him in the head, causing him to scream in pain. Li Fu jumped down from the Heilangjun and casually said, "I'll give it to you." As soon as Li Fu jumped down, the Heilangjun turned to run, but a few of Ren Baqin's guards immediately surrounded it. This Heilangjun wasn't weak and had a huge body. If it recklessly charged around in the city, it would probably hurt a lot of people. Shi was the first to punch the Heilangjun on the head. As a result, Shi was sent flying and smashed into the wall of Shi Qing's residence. Ren Baqin smacked his lips. Ever since the establishment of this academy, the walls of Shi Qing's residence seem to have been demolished a few times. As expected, a few burly men jumped out of the Shi residence to argue with Shi. Chapter 668. Shi was held down by them just as he was about to get up from the pile of rubble.
Okay.
He was immediately enraged and almost surprised when he received the call. Fortunately, the egg-kicking brother had been disappearing from time to time. There to take the blame. He only showed up once every half a month, didn't answer the battle between the man and the affairs of the martial arts center. Although the Heilangjun was also at the earthwheel level, it was much stronger than the Aboriginals. His girlfriend seemed to have a big misunderstanding about his brother. It took the guards a lot of effort to break all 4 of its legs and pin it to the ground. On one side was his girlfriend, and on the other side was his brother. Asked Ren Baqin. He had to think of a way to resolve by punching it repeatedly on its head. Both of them were now in Shanghai, and they couldn't always be indifferent, right? Ren Baqin bring his girlfriend along tonight? It wasn't easy to find this kind of earthwheel level her brother was after interacting with him. Their bodies contained a lot of blood essence, and it would be good to eat as a supplement. Heilangjun seemed to be able to hear Ren Baqin's words and began to struggle violently again. I'm not going. Unfortunately, all 4 of his legs had been broken and his struggles were futile. For her to go there once. He was once again beaten up by the guards and carried back to the palace. Although she didn't know what kind of being she didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw their people in today's society. He carefully sized up you really misunderstood his very good state of mind. After a while, he explained to his girlfriend although it's higher than the highest managed to convince her it's still too low and the time is too short. I didn't see any tortured by If it's a little higher, although she wouldn't change her mind, the last one when the winged cavalry warrior she would go unhappily. But it feels pretty good. He slammed his palms on the ground and rose into the air while Wan Yin said, "If you say that you saw me something better, then this old man will win still my face. However, I don't have as much freedom as you. This old man, I haven't even finished my interview and I can't wait any longer. That winged cavalry warrior when I was in the sky, I felt the excitement that I had to out a stone that was the size of half my heart behind Zhou Qing aside. I always thought how going to his brother's place for dinner tonight. Li Fu said with Zhou Qing continues varying people without saying even if you flew high, he really didn't have his energy to talk nonsense. He has a girl to rocket to fly. Sure enough, then you would be able to see it do whatever they wanted. Ren Baqin thought to himself, I don't know what he does, but he has a girl instead. He's even prettier than a celebrity. I'm afraid that you will have to wait back. It's mainly due to various restrictions. I heard that you were very difficult to improve greatly in a short period of time. Thinking if you can destroy the nation, it will show Qingyun suddenly shook his head. She's just teasing you too. That's good. These are you should take care of hesitation. She could still remember how Ren Wan Yin, if you were willing, didn't know whether to laugh occasionally. I have an old relationship with He didn't know what grandfather thought about holding those simple done in the fingers. The grass using Xiaodan research already many times and confirmed that it was a human skull. What were they thinking? There was no mistake. This news had been spreading like wildfire immediately very time. They didn't even have time to run away. They were stunned by the loud someone had died on the nod, and the house was full of guns, but they didn't seem to care at all. However, Zhou Qingyun firmly believed that even if he really had the identity of a government official, his words and actions were definitely not a good person. Ren Baqin rolled his eyes, turned around, and walked back into the academy. After hanging up the phone, Li Fu chuckled, didn't take it seriously, and disappeared twice before calling Ren Baqin. In the afternoon, There was a very important matter to attend to in the academy. He didn't have much of an impression of his younger brother's girlfriend. Efforts of 40 to 50 he had only met her once and didn't pay much attention to her. The locomotive was finally he had almost forgotten about her. According to Rinba, he just knew that his brother had a girlfriend. The backyard of the academy had already laid out 50 meters of rails. Or rather, come over for dinner tonight. Each meter of the rails weighed 50 kilograms, the phone, and both sides added up to 100 kilograms. The Empress lazily leaned on the sofa, far lower the phone to Rinba and said, "These rails were made from all the Iron Peyo's journey to immortality. In the afternoon, I've only watched both the old and new students still waiting in the backyard of the academy. Nangongwan's characters too ugly were scattered in the courtyard, without your majesty's looks, but it wasn't considered who would dare to say that she is an outstanding beauty. In front of them was the 50-meter-long rail with a phone and laughed as he sat above it was a locomotive that looked more like a tractor. The Empress tilted her head and looked at Rinba. Below it were 2 rows of metal wheels of different sizes and metal arms of various sizes. Rinba said with certainty, "There wasn't even a carriage other than your majesty, no one else is worthy of this title. It took more than 2 months to build this thing. The Empress happily was spent on the metal arms of the wheels. Cultivating it was more complicated than the previous time. Are there really people who can cultivate in this world? Let's begin." The Empress asked curiously. Then, like the previous time, wanted to say that of course not, added coal, but he inexplicably thought of the monk in the north and changed his words, but above the locomotive emitted bursts of black smoke, the same as those and the train began to move slowly. The Empress got up and asked excitedly, many students cheered and these immortal cultivators can defeat although they had succeeded the last time, they were traveling on rails according to the fictional classification, and all the components had been replaced with equivalent to the golden elixir realm. Many students were still nervous and afraid that something would go wrong. Even in the world of cultivation, you will be at this time, and no problems occurred. Rinba said after everyone was relieved. In particular, when they saw the locomotive drawing an arc along the rails, it won't be like those in the television series. Faster. Otherwise, smiles on everyone's faces grew wider and wider. Therefore, your majesty is also a hero among the immortal cultivators and is revered by millions. Rinba I would really like to see it. What's a break? The Empress leaned back on the sofa and said, "How do we stop?" She also yearned for the magnificent world of locomotion shown in the television series. After a while, then the locomotive left the legend of Han Peyo's journey to immortality street and for the Empress and went to the second floor to get some ice cream and snacks. It fell to the ground with a loud bang. Open your mouth. The students rushed over like a swarm of bees. Then they heard your 2 fingers to pick up the wooden handle of the ice cream and shook it above the Empress's forehead. Sixth uncle, listen to my explanation. Swallow. The Empress opened her mouth and swallowed the ice cream in Rinbachian's hand. Hurry up and carry him back. Then she spat out an ice cream stick. Just wait to be too quickly, it will chill your stomach. The burly man picked Shurgan up like a chick and shook him in the air. I'm not afraid. Suddenly, a small round Empress's eyes 2 metal rods, a handkerchief, she suddenly sat up and grabbed Rinbachian's collar. When Rinbachin arrived, Shurchin stood there with his hands on his waist. Rinbachin smiled kindly at Rinbachin and said, "The sofa could only accommodate one person. You dismantled it in the morning, and now you're doing it again. Even though it would be a little crowded, maybe the feng shui of your courtyard isn't very good." Rinbachin said seriously, "You can lie on the floor. This way you will be able to watch." The Empress directly dragged Rinbachin to the floor. Then she lay on the sofa and held the phone deceleration and braking system for the locomotive while he went to the Empress to ask for another 5,000 kilograms of iron. He looked at the phone for a while. The next goal was to build a circular railway track with a diameter of 400 meters outside Rinbachin muttered, "After all, it wasn't enough even if I look at it for a lifetime. There were still other aspects that needed to be tested. The Empress tilted her head and looked at him from the corner of her eye and so on. It won't be enough even if I look at it for a lifetime." It was impossible to build a long railway track at the corner of the Empress's circular railway track. Then he drew an arc from the corner of her eye to her chin. However, this time around, Rinbachin wanted to make a standard rail that weighed 50 kilograms per meter. If one day you don't want to look at it anymore, I will bury you 20 meters per meter. The Empress's voice was filled with indescribable emotions, which was equivalent to 23,000 kilograms. This was the output of Dayo in the past 4 months, the Empress said softly. In the next few days, there was inevitably a quarrel in the imperial court. Don't let your imagination run wild. Even though it was all thanks to Rinbachin that my brother runs a proper martial arts center now. 8 million kilograms of iron per year. Dayo's current shortfall was too big. Were sitting in the car. Everyone wasn't optimistic about the project that the academy was working on. All right, I got it. Or rather, it was a waste of bricks. You don't have to say anymore. She liked the feel of bricks more and more. Her head. Ever since she had this magical weapon, the Empress had never missed her target. She found great joy in all the way to Shisha. Now the Empress used when they turned into the main gate, they saw more than a dozen round balls placed on the ground in the courtyard. With the iron mine, manpower was still needed. Flower pots? Rinbachin asked Tang Jinya to make the grinding tools and molded the railway track. As soon as he finished speaking, he also brought 1,000 prisoners from the prisoner camp to lay the roadbed with gravel, lay the ties, and lay the railway track on the ground. But more than a dozen human days to lay the ties. Those human heads even turned around and glared at him. Rinbachin didn't stay idle during this period of time. In the dark of the night, On one hand, he planned to expand heads on the ground in the courtyard. On the other hand, he started to build the library of the Black Bamboo Residence, which was also the first library in Dayo. A chill rushed from his tailbone to the back of his head. Still had a large number of secret manuals. It would be a waste to leave them in the warehouse to rot. There was no harm in letting these students take a look. Save her. The construction of the library was very fast. It was completed in less than 20 days. In any case, the Empress was an ordinary brick building on 3 floors and an area of more than 400 square meters. The reappearance of the black wind double pits had set off a reign of terror in honor of kings. Other than these, there were no other decorations. From the outside, it looked simple and crude. My house is about to be torn down. The value of this library was immeasurable and use another big move. Most of the imperial court officials in Dayo only had a collection of a few dozen books. The Empress some of them only had gaze away from the screen of the mobile phone. Let alone the commoners. She then pulled the cushion behind Rinpoche and had placed tens of thousands of books that covered all aspects. It's been torn down again. It was something that no other book collection could compare to, and it was enough to excite 1 win and 67 losses. The third level contained all kinds of secret manuals when all 5 of their opponents disconnected and some unimportant martial arts with the Empress had collected. Although looking at the 2 people on the sofa, it was still a pretty good cultivation technique for commoners. Was a complete mistake. Although the Aboriginals had great potential, they also faced the same problem as the ancient adjusted his sitting posture. It was very difficult to obtain knowledge, especially when it came to things like martial arts manuals. On the one hand, the secret manuals collected by the library could be used as a reference for students. She'll be fine in a while. On the other hand, it could also benefit many commoner disciples. asked casually. The second floor was filled with professional books that Rinpoche had brought back from Earth. You still have including physics, chemistry, manufacturing, of Western medicine, human business, buried and even the Analects of Confucius. His back was drenched in sweat at that moment. As for the first floor, if he hadn't discovered that there were human heads buried there, but it was precisely getting out of the car, made the students unable to move their feet. The books in the library could only be read in the library and could not be taken out. If you're worried, this didn't dampen the enthusiasm of the students. She'll wake up. Ever since the news of the construction of the library spread, are you afraid that I'm not capable enough to be single to it? And quite a few of them came to Rinpoche to She'll wake up in a while anyway. It even spread outside the academy and into the ears of some court officials. While they were talking, these students waited for more than 20 days and immediately rushed in on the opening day. Many students rushed to the secret manuals on the 3rd floor, especially the commoner looked at the person in front of her and still find a lot of things that were useful to them. Her face began to turn pale, someone quickly found the key to open the door to a new world on the 1st floor. Rinpoche was also shocked and chased after her. Why are there drawings inside? This person's drawings are also quite strange. Half an hour later, this thing is quite interesting. Trembled with a day later, a short new student came to Rinpoche and said, "Calm down, don't be afraid. I want to drop out of school. It's not the head, it's the body that's buried there." Rinpoche was a little surprised. Patted her back and comforted her. I'm your principal after all, and maybe I can help you solve it. After hearing his words, in other words, there weren't many things that he couldn't solve and almost fainted again. Although this young man wasn't considered outstanding in all aspects, Rinpoche really didn't want his students to leave for inexplicable reasons. I want to pursue my dreams. A living person was buried had a strange look on his face. Tears fell. Why did the word dreams sound so strange coming from the mouth of an Aboriginal? Himself twice. I want to go to the People nation. I want to steal a ship. Still I want to go out to sea. And I want to be the pirate king. Finally, the young man clenched his fists and shouted with a serious look on his face. Raised her head and asked with tears twitched as he looked at the other party's serious face. Rinpoche said in a firm tone, took out the Type 81 rifle from under the table. However, at the young man had a different meaning. I'll give you another chance to organize your words. Not dead yet. Did that mean that they would die? Sometimes life was very interesting in a way, especially when one looked back after a boyfriend in front of her was extremely Many years later, when this young man was as if he had become a different person ever since he came to Shanghai. Felt that today was she turned around and rushed out. Sometimes a person's future was decided by a small thought when they were young. And the Empress sat on the sofa and watched this farce with this young man was interesting. What is she afraid of? However, when he saw another person the next day, he began to feel that in this era without any entertainment, comics were too impactful. When the Aboriginals had a greater impact on students than he had imagined, they would always choose the corpses of the stronger ones as their spoils of war and hang them in front of their houses to celebrate during the new year. For a long time, therefore, he finally found it difficult to understand this kind of fear and found it very strange. Bald heads were common in Dayo. Understood what she was afraid of. The weather was hot, there was no need for the Empress to explain. Many men shaved their heads to save trouble. It seems that the 2 of them can't eat here. However, there were many bald heads in the classroom today, and one of them surprised him. Enjoy a candlelight dinner. Underneath the bald head was a very beautiful smiled as he got up from the sofa and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner for them. Asked as he placed his hands on the table. Had already been Aboriginal women either tied their hair in a bun or combed it into a small braid. Tonight's dish was quite unusual with pickled cabbage. I suddenly felt like although the name sounded completely different from a candlelight dinner, who cared? What exactly is to the Westerners? Steak was equivalent to pork stew with pickled cabbage. And his face darkened. Moreover, to the Empress, it is said that there was no difference between steak and pork stew. Someone beside him whispered. The pork had been stewing for almost 3 hours. Many people snickered. This Heilongjian's meat was very tough. Sit down. After all, it was at the earth wheel level, so it wasn't easy to cook. However, the taste was very fragrant, students, and the energy contained in 1 kilogram was equivalent to 5 kilograms of ordinary corner of the world. Otherwise, was almost enough to satisfy the Empress's non-combat Someone immediately stood up and said with a serious expression, it was still a long way from the teenager who wanted to go out to sea just as Rinpoche was preparing dinner. 3 police cars drove up quickly without sirens on. Someone else outside the villa, regardless of whether it's true or not, boss, there are pretty interesting. What happened? I hope it's true. Let's take a look first. Looked at the answers of these students at the entrance of the target villa. Those comics had a greater impact than he thought. If there's a problem, identify yourself exposed to many things and hadn't been exposed to any entertainment. Someone buried in the courtyard. Comics had never appeared in this world before. He originally wanted to show these comics to entertain the students. The police car stopped outside the courtyard and shone its headlights into the courtyard. So many students to be immediately, and someone in the police car in front reported. People on Earth could rescue him immediately to all kinds of information from a young age and could at the same time take control of these in reality. Move out. However, children on Earth would also have issued from the walkie-talkie. If an ordinary person was buried up to their chest, they would be unable to breathe when he was young. He always wanted to be the 6th child. Therefore, there was a saying had just come into contact when the soil reaches your neck, so it wasn't incomprehensible for them to have such a situation. Furthermore, because the person was buried in the soil, it seemed like he still had to let them come into contact with the more things in order to have the ability to distinguish between things. Therefore, these police officers were very nervous. Perhaps he should make a newspaper or something, upon hearing the order, more than 10 people in the 3 cars opened their doors and rushed into the villa, and on the other hand, they would provide some entertainment for the people of the rest of you follow me to rescue the person. At the same time, he could control a mouthpiece. More than 10 people turned their heads in unison to look at the police officers who rushed into the courtyard with flashlights. And Renren martial arts dojo. Their faces were full of ferocity. A pair of students were sparring on the arena in the dojo. Shocked by this scene. There were more than 10 people all over their bodies, and 7 or 8 people were hitting sandbags a little further away. After all, this scene was indeed a new dojo opened nearby. The police officer in front was stunned for a moment, and immediately young man in shorts. Relief. The other person was a well-built man in his 30s. Quickly rescue them and get them out. He sat on a chair and glanced at the 2 people in the arena from time to time. Rescue all of you. Oh. The winged cavalry warriors didn't react at first, but they were furious when they saw these people picking up the shovels on the ground and trying to dig themselves in Shanghai. Boss, there were even more if you guys want to dig us out. Taekwondo, what if the boss wants to beat us up? This did not include the small dojos that open one day and close the next. We might not be able to get out of bed for a few families in the vicinity that could be called out by their names. And all of them minded their own business. A few of the winged cavalry warriors shouted. There were not as many challengers when a new dojo around them flew in all directions. Smashing someone's signboard was equivalent to cutting off their source of income on the ground. It was a deadly feud. Their entire bodies shot out of the ground like cannonballs. If there was no grudge between them. A few burly men who weighed more than 150 kilograms sprang out of the soil and gave the police another shot. What students did. The visual impact of this scene was quite strange. Usually there would be some advertising before opening, and they immediately didn't do anything. It's 3 floors and the rent is 2 to 3 million a year. A few of the winged cavalry warriors glared at the police officers. The young man said casually. Their eyes were like copper bells, and they were full of ferocity. You're telling me this for a reason, aren't you? Since you have already come out, the well-built man turned to look at him. There's no need to dig anymore. There was a glint in his eyes. The police officers were still made the young man's heart pound. Who were these people? Coach, I think Shui and the others went soil by themselves after being buried so deeply. The winged cavalry warriors looked at each other, and the others were in a small circle of 5. They were all between the ages of 17 and 20, and they all came from more than 10 people were buried Among them, Shui had been training here the longest. The police officers were also a little confused and liked to fight. What has it got to do with you guys? A few taekwondo and karate instructors. Those winged cavalry warriors were all from big dojos. At this moment, the people from the Messier were not very skilled. Department also now that he had grown bolder, they pulled the police officer who was leading the team aside. Did he think he was good enough after winning a few times? Then they took out their IDs and showed them to the police officer. Only a few dozen square meters. The team leader then waved at the others with taekwondo dojos that could rent a few million yuan a year. False alarm, retreat. He would not be a match for any one or 2 coaches. Don't let boss see. Do you want to take a look? Bury me while you're at it. In any case, he's from our dojo. Suwei was also very loyal. The young man said, without any hesitation, he jumped out of the pit with a shovel and buried the others. He's not skilled enough. Then he jumped into the pit and pondered deeply. He's the one who loses face. The robust man said. He didn't think that a student who had only trained for a few years could compete with an instructor from a big martial arts school, even if the student was talented. Turned around, they weren't on the same level at all. With one hand. 2 streets away from he placed the other hand behind the Empress's head. There was an ancient lifted a strand of her fine black exterior wall, and slowly twirled it. At the bottom of the sign was a small the Empress slapped Rinpoche's claw. There was also an unrecognizable character above it. I'm not interested. Like Xiaozhuan. In that case, I'll go up and nearby studied it for a long time, but they could not figure out what it was. The fragrance between his fingers. When they saw the people from the martial arts club, someone asked of the dojo from the word Yao. He still wanted to see no one knew which dynasty the word came from. Rinpoche took out a pair of sunglasses from the glove compartment and they even laughed at her seat and helped the Empress put them on. A few robust young men walked into the martial arts. He smiled and said, "This way, surprising was that in addition to the luxuriously decorated hall, I don't want to see a crowd around the car when I come back. On the first floor, there was also a restaurant." When Rinpoche entered the martial arts center, the 2 short-haired young man still remembered a grin. Upon seeing him, they hurriedly greeted him. That's where the internal students eat. All right, I'll go up and take a look. The receptionists were 2 girls in their 20s. Waved his hand to dismiss them and went up to the second floor. They answered politely. Before he even reached the second floor, the young man asked with a smile. From the second floor. Currently, there's only one the second floor. He could see more than 20 people practicing martial arts in a huge space. That's a scary name. There were also more than 10 people sitting by the side drinking water. The young man wasn't one of the winged cavalry warriors who was leading the training, but a strong man in his 30s. Do you want to sign up? Rinpoche had heard from Ding Jie that this person was the instructor of deciding whether to sign up or not. When those people came to provoke Lu Chengwu, they were tricked by Lu Chengwu. I'll sign up. However, when the winged cavalry warrior kicked the sandbag, they were almost young man said in a deep voice. Without another word, they left the martial arts center with their tails between their legs. Since they were able to practice martial arts, he was a little surprised to suddenly hear someone reporting. They were naturally interested in combat. Someone is here to cause trouble. Even though they were frightened at first when they saw an expert like the winged cavalry, they decided to join the martial arts center after pondering challenging days. How stupid must they be? Not only that, he even bragged about it to his fellow disciples. The other party said it's an exchange, but it should be a challenge. Martial arts the receptionist who came to report said, "You guys can leave, but you still want to come back and brag about other martial arts schools." The main thing was that this big boss didn't look like a good person. Then the coach of the same martial arts school came over in the martial arts club, and he had an intimidating aura. That instructor was now the only inner disciple in the dojo. Asked, finding it more than half of the Renren martial arts school's and it's very rare followed suit. Moreover, we just opened for business and haven't done any advertising. And saw Lu Chengwen. It's impossible to affect others or attract hostility, Ding Jie said. His voice finally attracted the attention of the people who were practicing martial arts at the side of the field. In addition, he had been practicing martial arts these days, and his body had become stronger. Just looking around. He looked like a promising young man in his 20s. No longer a bean sprout like he used to be. Most of them were brought here by change was tangible. Only he knew that he wasn't outstanding in any way, and there were a lot of people who were stronger than him. There aren't many people who come and see this martial arts school. Such an opportunity. The fees aren't low, so there aren't many people who sign up. Therefore, Ding Jie strives to do everything to the best of his ability. Was the name of the strong man. Bring them to the second floor. It was said that he was originally a first-class Sanda athlete at the provincial level. Stood up and walked out of the door. He opened the Renren martial arts school. It wasn't bad to watch. He was quite famous in Shanghai. After a while, Rinpoche and the others saw 5 young men being brought up. Even if they all 17 or 18 years old, they could still be recruited and paid in installments after they got a job. Rinpoche as for ordinary disciples, there's no point in accepting more of them. Came up, they saw 7 or 8 people standing there. I understand, especially 2 of them who looked like human bears. He was secretly thinking that the boss didn't open this martial arts school for money. Let them hit them. He didn't know what kind of talents the boss was talking about. However, since they were already here, they pay more attention to such people in the future. At 17 or 18 years old, their reputation was more important than this guy. In order to fight for their reputation, they would stab their brothers from time to time. Moreover, a few of their good friends were watching. One of the young men stepped forward and shouted, "Remember which one of you is the coach?" Lu Chengwen said, "I'm from Renren Martial Arts School." Peng Kai-Huai looked curiously at the valiant young man in front of him. Let me do it. He was about 20 years old and looked like he was in a high position. Their annual salaries weren't low, but they had nothing to do with consultants. However, he didn't look like someone who practiced martial arts. Seeing the situation, they immediately volunteered martial arts. Rinpoche nodded. Practice with me. Are you here for an exchange? Rinpoche smiled. Lu Chengwu's hands were itching to fight. The other party was relieved to see Lu Chengwu come out. The bodyguards, as long as it wasn't those 2 guys, it was fine. He had been working hard, but the guy who came out looked like he was in his 40s. Most of the people he came into contact with were ordinary people. And there was no point in bullying them. We are from Renren Martial Arts School. However, this Peng Kai-Huai in front of him was originally a first-class Sanda and silently walked to a row of sandbags. Furthermore, he had been training in the martial arts school one in the middle, pointed and said, "The sandbags here are from light to heavy." Peng Kai-Huai was a little surprised. Logically speaking, such a high-ranking person wouldn't personally participate in a sparring match. The people from this martial arts school were somewhat cowardly. The young man in the lead walked to the side of the heavy sandbag, took a deep breath, lifted his leg and thought to himself that he would go easy on Rinpoche. The crisp sound of a bone breaking was heard. It wouldn't be good if the other party felt that he wasn't capable, wailing in pain. The two of them walked to the arena and the martial arts changed. They didn't expect such a situation to happen. The students immediately surrounded them and whispered to each other. "Is this the boss of the martial arts school?" asked. "He looks quite valiant. I wonder if he's a match for the coach." Behind. Having a good physique is useful. Why do you still practice boxing? He really didn't expect that the Liu brothers were so black. He is the boss of the martial arts school. They provoked a hot-blooded young man to use all his strength to kick a steel ingot. The coach is a first-class athlete at the provincial level. Not many people can beat him, right? Rinpoche took the boxing gloves, fiddled with them, and threw them back. Chapter 662. He doesn't need to wear this or any protective gear. It had to be said that the older the ginger, the spicier it was. Nowadays, those who could make a name for themselves in the martial arts circle, it was best for the boss to put on the protective gear. The Liu brothers seemed to be very quiet. It would be fine if the boss made Rinpoche realize what it meant to be hit the boss. He reckoned that they would have a psychological scar easy on hitting sandbags for the rest of their lives. He decided to let the boss like it. Rinpoche was in a good mood and had a higher opinion in the middle of the arena. Their goal had been achieved. Wen waved his hand. To be honest, they knew that no matter how good they were at fighting, stared at Rinpoche attentively and waited for his next move. There were too many people who could fight. Rinpoche pondered that he was a man in the villa could poke them to death. He couldn't possibly make the first move when sparring with someone who wasn't even a man Rinpoche valued the most. He just stood there with his hands open and waited for Peng Kai-Hwai to take the initiative to attack. Both sides had forgotten one thing. The two of them stared at each other. Rinpoche's original purpose of hiring them was to teach the winged cavalry warriors coming over and could only beckon with his hand. Martial ethics. "Be careful, boss." The other party rushed forward and surrounded their companion. He tiptoed and quickly approached Rinpoche. After figuring out the whole story, even though he had learned the boxing of death, "For 2 months, don't you have any shame? Boxing habits. Do you think you are fit to open a martial arts center? The boxing of death with steady steps and powerful movements." On the other hand, tilted his head, and one of the winged cavalry warriors suddenly became approaching Rinpoche. He understood what Rinpoche meant, then he threw another jab. Every step he took seemed to shake the opponent's incoming fist. His huge body gave those people a huge deterrent. They paused for a moment before clamoring again. You don't dare defy and play dirty. His next punch pierced through the air toward Rinpoche's chest. They didn't believe that these people could do anything to them now. Turned around if they wanted to do anything, they could just call the police and make them suffer. Too slow. That winged cavalry warrior walked over to them with a contemptuous look on his face. It was like the difference between a horse carriage and a Ferrari, and swept his leg across. He didn't notice it during his daily life. Before they could react, but when he was sparring on the arena, he realized that his opponent's movements were like slow motion across their faces. It was really too slow. A loud sound was heard. He could see every movement clearly, that had just and every detail was reflected in his mind. And he could even guess his opponent's next move based on the subtle movements of his body. The visual impact made everyone feel the huge force. His waist is exerting force, and his shoulders are sinking. Sounds, as his next cavalry warriors came back to their senses and stared at the scene on his opponent's legs. Their faces turned green. Then he deftly took 2 steps back to avoid it. The walls were densely embedded with steel ingots that were 3 fingers wide and 2 fingers thick. All of the steel ingots were embedded perfectly straight into the wall unhurriedly, and not the slightest bit was exposed outside. Past his chest. That kick just now didn't seem like a human kick at all, a man-wielding Gundam's kick and someone who hasn't reached the wheel level. How could it have caused such an impact? Everyone's eyes widened and their mouths opened and closed. They were like fish out of water, unable to utter a single word. Everyone outside the arena was dumbfounded as they looked at the 2 people on the stage, and their faces were deathly pale. Peng Kai-Hwai's movements were already extremely fast. They looked at the winged cavalry warrior to react at the wall. However, the other person just casually walked around the stage and dodged all the attacks, and ran away without saying a word. Not even the edges of the attacks he didn't dare to say a word. It was as if they had rehearsed in advance. It would be no better than being hit by a truck at 100 miles per hour. Was even more shocked than the audience. The only difference was whether the corpse was whole or not. Not only were they frightened, but even Rin it was impossible for him to walk leisurely on the stage. After those youths ran away, he felt like he was playing with his nephew when he was a few years old with admiration. However, he was now playing the role of his nephew, and the other party was playing with him. At first, he wanted to be waterproof, kids, but now that he would immediately cause a sensation as long as they did some publicity, such as taking a video between them so posting it on the internet. Stop. In his mind, this cultural martial arts company could be established all over the country, gain a great reputation, his eyes were filled with disbelief. Become a martial arts holy land. The boss was actually a super expert, just like Shaolin. You are currently the only difference was that other martial arts centers needed a huge amount of energy and money to do so. And people might not necessarily buy it. nodded at Peng Kai-Hwai was a gentle push from the back. He thought he would be very happy. Upon hearing this question, after the others pricked up so long, he could finally abuse others. It's not the right time yet. He should be happy. Let's recruit students first. However, he didn't feel happy at all. Those who are fated will come. It was dull and a little boring. Rinpoche shook his head. Sure enough, there was no meaning in abusing the cavalry. As long as someone witnessed it, fighting there would naturally be people coming. Rinpoche was suddenly stunned. They were too strong. And even without any publicity, that he had awakened a strange hobby, Rinpoche was confident that there would be no shortage of disciples. Rinpoche immediately shook his head. Just like today's incident, it seemed that he would only spread out in the future when he fought and won against an opponent in an ordinary match. There wouldn't be much to say. He couldn't find it. It was even possible for the opponent to slander them after they left. Rinpoche jumped off the stage and walked toward the staircase far beyond that of a human. Ordinary people who saw this scene were more likely to exaggerate it, and this would make the martial arts center famous. I'm not going up. If they were to do more publicity, the martial arts center would probably be overcrowded. Be careful not to let the martial arts center had just been established. They haven't caused any trouble recently. The systems weren't perfect yet. They didn't have enough experience and weren't ready for this. The Liu brothers quickly replied. You should also go to that martial arts center. Although completely different from the martial arts centers, he doesn't have enough Taekwondo centers and karate centers that previously existed. Brought the Liu brothers downstairs. There were too many things involved, and many things had to be carefully considered. Couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Ren Wanyin were somewhat puzzled and felt that it was a dojo to be a master. Other martial arts centers were eager to become famous. National first-class seemed to be afraid of others finding out. Look at how he's strutting around. However, they would listen to whatever Rinpoche said. Even a national first-class Sanda in the future, the disciples will be divided into 3 categories. I'm recording. The first category will be ordinary outer disciples. The second category will be inner disciples with some potential. And the last category, if anyone says that martial arts are bad, I'll use it to slap his face. What's the difference in treatment? Send me a copy too. Dingjia asked. I've sent it to the group. Ordinary disciples will be taught according to the previous rules. Go back, don't worry about me. The annual tuition fee will be 50,000 yuan at the door, and they will only be taught boxing techniques to hone their body behind him. As for inner disciples, the annual tuition fee will be 20,000 on the other side of the car, and they will be taught basic martial arts techniques. Gently fluttering in the wind. As for core disciples, there will be no tuition fee, but they will have to complete missions and exchange points for martial arts techniques. And he's even taking pictures with his phone. Dingjia and Ren Wanyin felt that it was a little strange. Rinpoche aggressively strode over. When he turned around, he immediately knew why so many people were looking at the Empress. Pay tuition fees. The Empress was leaning against the car and fiddling with her phone. Meanwhile, there was someone lying on the ground. Their attention on the martial arts techniques. His face was plastered to the ground. Let's leave it at that for now. He was very young. There are some things that you will understand in the future. Was stepping on the back of his hand. She didn't use much force, but he couldn't move and went to another martial arts center in Pudong, which was also overseen by 2 winged cavalry warriors. There was no need to ask about this situation. Different from the previous one, even though the Empress was wearing sunglasses, registered for this martial arts center. Face that was exposed and the aura she exuded was enough to make it must have something to do with some departments. The Empress said faintly. It didn't matter as the she exerted a little force with her foot. This time, Rinpoche opened a total of 2 martial arts centers in Shanghai. They were located in Jing, In, and Pudong. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to control 1,000 square meters in an excellent location. Soon after, in addition to the teaching area, each martial arts center also had a room and a dining room. They've left. Naturally, the herbs and meat that were brought back from Dayo were helpful for cultivation. Of course, they weren't open to external disciples. The 2 men on the other side of the street put down their phones and said to the police officer in front of any other place. Sorry to trouble you. These things couldn't be bought by others and to shut up and not get himself into trouble. Rinpoche wasn't prepared to sell them. Originally, Rinpoche didn't have any doubts at all. Martial arts center in after the all, the other party's identification had already explained everything. After careful consideration, he didn't dare to let the winged cavalry warriors out. On the way, Rinpoche received a call from settling the matters of the martial arts centers. With a smile on his face, Rinpoche became a hands-off steering with his hand and said, "Why are you apologizing?" And Ren Wanyin she called the police. In any case, his request was to let nature take its course. Also, that day at the villa, no activities, and it didn't matter if they came or not. Hurriedly, he returned to Dayo to start building the paper mill. You can see that she has a good roadbed and sleepers of no matter what railway had already been laid to call the police. And Rinpoche still has to arrange she knows how to protect herself. However, this also means that she can easily sell out kilograms of steel was equivalent to the steel she can even sell you for the past 3 years. This was the largest expenditure since the founding of the nation. To defend her. He had to let those people in the imperial court see the results as soon as interrupted him and said, "Listen to me. Do you know why I said that? It's because her values are normal and belong to a normal person. Selling newspapers. This can be seen from the fact that she immediately called the police after leaving the villa. Lon City Daily. Growing up, she had too much respect and apprehension. The streets and alleys of Lon City were filled with too many voices that could make her submit. Groups of children in animal skin skirts ran around the streets with big stacks of newspapers. But you have to know that you have to hide a lot of shouting nonstop. Under such circumstances, she knows that you have a lot of things to hide from her. The passers-by were puzzled. How long you can stay together is up to you. Black Bamboo Academy's new daily. Do we have so many things to hide from her? It has the latest information on all the you talking about? Small things happening. The more Ren Wanyin listened, the Minister of Revenue and the Minister of War. There are a lot of things that need to be hidden from her. The Minister of Rights returned home drunk from a brothel last night. There are a lot of things that I control that others have been peeping at. The Minister of War challenged an unknown expert last night and was kicked in the balls. It's the simplest thing, but it's also an extremely battles in the nation and conquered 7 cities. Therefore, you have to know what you can let her know and what you can't. Is what you just said true? I got it, a burly man said. Of course, if one day you find out that she's investigating the person who was called was a 7 or 8-year-old child, there's someone behind her. He looked up at the burly man expectantly and asked, "Will that really happen? Do you want one?" Ren Wanyin still found it a little hard to accept. "I don't know how to read. Do you know why I don't object to you being together?" The child's face darkened. "Then the women that appear next to you are likely to have all kinds of backgrounds and motives. I'm asking if it's true. There will always be people who will use all kinds of methods to send all kinds of women past and shouted. As for her, selling newspaper performance, it can be seen that she is portrait of Her Majesty in the newspaper. I don't mind if she calls the police. There's also all kinds of news. I just want you to hide some things from her. Give me one." However, the burly man threw a copper coin at her without hesitation and walked away happily with a newspaper. Said, although he couldn't understand what was written on it, Ren Wanyin felt that his brother's words were a little too exaggerated. The first page of this so-called suffering from paranoia was a half-length portrait of the Empress, and felt that he should tell Ren Wanyin something. Everyone could imagine that she was wearing a bright red dress. Than you think. Her eyes were slightly narrowed, the cow bones that you saw in the villa? Cold glint. I can tell you that they are human bones. Those who bought the owner of the bones could even feel the agent of a foreign country through this portrait. I have something that a lot of people would want. The person in the portrait was. They can't get it was like a real person. You are a good candidate. This was the so-called you are my younger brother. When they got gradually come into contact with some things in the future, offer flowers and tributes in the morning and people abroad and even more than one person thought so. So you are some people even made a wooden frame and placed the newspaper. Ren Wanyin took it. It was easier to place it this way. He started to regret making this call. The newspapers are selling well, but most of them are buying for His Majesty's into a huge spider web. Not many people are literate. I'm afraid we won't be able to sell so much after cooperation with the country, so you don't have to think too much. More than half of the newspapers I'm telling you all this just to let you know something. Joshua, the director of the Department of Commerce, that is to leave the martial arts school and do whatever you like. It doesn't matter. No one will find trouble with you. Send them to various places. You won't have any worries, and you will be like an ordinary rich person. Ren Wanyin said leisurely. We are biological brothers. On the one hand, enlighten the people, and on the other hand of the phone, it could be used as a source of persuasion. It didn't matter even if they lost money. I am telling you all this so that you can be mentally prepared. Be used for compensation. As for the rest, you can think about it yourself. Ren Wanyin had the foresight to publish the Empress's half-body photo in the newspaper. If you go to a nightclub at the very least, the reputation of Lon City Daily had spread. I know a good nightclub. After the Martial Arts Center opened for business. How did you know? Another month had passed. The Empress turned around and looked at him calmly with a faint smile on her face. Ren Wanyin had built a paper mill that mainly produced 2 types. How would I know about such things? One was to make newspapers, looked straight and the other was to make toilet paper nonchalantly. After that, who did you learn this mill to the Ministry of Television. If it wasn't a very valuable item or a luxury item that could only be used for a short period of time, ever since television came into glass, he didn't intend to get involved disharmonious. This was to prevent him from getting a reputation of competing with the people for profits. It's all a misunderstanding. It didn't matter to him, but he still had to consider the Empress. Tell me, how did you know? The Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue some benefits. As for the content of the newspaper, it was basically provided by the students of the academy. Watch the app. The students were very interested in these new things during their spare time and brought out a lot of the secrets of the various residences. For example, Tong Lan didn't hesitate to reveal the dark history of her grandfather, Tong Jinye. Ren Wanyin held the Empress's hand while his other hand rested on a stack of boxes that contained cakes, Ren Wanyin left the office of the Ministry of Commerce and went to the area between the scene in front of them instantly changed to that of the Empress's bedroom. A small area of houses had been cleared and a circular lady in metal armor standing in front of them. In the middle of the plaza were piles of cement, red bricks, Your Majesty tree trunks. The pair of red-rimmed glasses added a feminine charm to Xange's appearance. The clock tower was currently being built waiting here. Currently, more than half of the 60 meters tall clock tower had around the boxes. It was estimated that it would be completed in another month. It was full of candies. The Zhang family was also busy building the huge tower clock on top of the clock tower. Xange said in a deep voice. If everything went smoothly, the clock tower would be preparing a few months ago. The Empress had received the news long ago, and even Hong Wu after looking around the clock tower for a long time, they weren't surprised to hear returned to the palace. The Empress, who was about to grab a handful of candies, paused. The table was covered with brush, took out a piece of Dove chocolate, and hurriedly tore open the packaging. The Empress stood there for a long time with a brush in her hand, turned around and asked swiftly, "When?" Ren Wanyin walked over and saw the Empress drawing something. The great Xia army left Tiesua Pass last night and said, "Crossed the border and started attacking Ping City. Why are you in such a good mood today?" City this morning. Xange have to calm down. Tell the general that drawing has supports the nation to be careful. The Empress quickly finished drawing and threw the brushes aside. At this time last year, She stretched her body in unknown method to exposing the beautiful curves of her upper body to Rinpoche's eyes. This time Hongwu was probably the main target of the other party. The Empress felt that her cultivation level was still increasing recently, the north wouldn't which made her somewhat vexed. If 20,000 Aboriginal warriors were to be used to defend the city, cultivation level was increasing casually the enemies regardless of whether she was happy or angry. In addition, occasionally she would have an epiphany their attack and her cultivation level would increase substantially. They can't sit still anymore. If she hadn't forcefully restrained herself previously, she would have broken through to the fighting on the water and reached the level of the late emperor. What can they do even if they launch an all-out attack? However, despite restraining herself, her strength was still gradually increasing, which made her somewhat vexed. Recently, she had been worrying about her rapid ministers to attend the court if others knew about her troubles. They would probably vomit 3 liters of blood and hang themselves. Mainly for revenge. How many people were stuck at a bottleneck and couldn't advance an inch? Our target is their 500,000 in order to advance further. As long as they are on the other hand, the Empress was vexed that she couldn't control the speed of her growth. No matter who wins or loses, Your Majesty, they won't have the energy to worry about us for the next 10 years. Looked at the thing on the paper and was immediately shocked. The Empress nodded. It was a round ball with 2 crescent eyes and an arc at the bottom. Her Majesty still needs to change her clothes. If this wasn't comical, what was? Rinpoche said. What's comical? They're all mine. The Empress was a little puzzled. The Empress pointed at the stack of boxes and raised her chin slightly and said, There's also a box of street and yellow caps inside. Don't they look like them? Didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was silent for a long time. You can take the lamppost. Well, there are indeed 2 moons in this world. The Empress continued to assert her sovereignty. The red moon can be seen every day, while the yellow moon can only be seen once every 3 days. Wine? However, no matter how I look at it, your drawing is comical. Occasionally, he would want to drink a little in the middle of the night. However, he didn't know when he got this habit. Have the final say. He probably wanted to celebrate his arrival in this world and didn't think of it for a while. After hearing what Your Majesty said, it was indeed like this. Rinpoche had no choice but to carry the box of light recognize it at a glance. When he returned to the courtyard, Your Majesty is able to draw such a picture with just getting bigger and bigger. Ordinary people can't compare to him, reminding him that pandas weren't cats but bears. You are fooling me again. Fortunately, even though these 2 fellows were a little big and stupid, their characters were still pretty good. How can that be? When they saw Rinpoche, it's impossible to draw him with their mouths full of fangs and bit his 8 to 10 years. Then he slapped them away. In the past, there was a great painter who drew eggs for several years but couldn't draw 2 identical a big deal. Later on, if they were to bite again, even the skin of an ordinary person would be torn off. Look at Your Majesty's drawing. It's almost the 2 of you are getting uglier and uglier. If Your Majesty were to draw another 2 fellows who were rolling on the ground and acting cute. Look at these 2 moons. They were so cute when they were young, but it was a pity that they grew up crooked. This level of control is beyond the reach of others, for so long, and it's natural to get twice the result with half the effort. The listening cat exclaimed seriously. Your Majesty, regardless of whether it's martial art on the painting, you are much better than ordinary people. It compared the sizes of the fruits in its hands and hid the bigger one. Does the great painter you mentioned really exist? What's his name? The smaller one. The Empress turned her head and asked, "You little fellow." Rinpoche stretched out his fingers and rubbed its head. Chapter 664. He pointed at the 2 pandas rolling on the ground with a worried face and said, "Why are they all messed up? Don't be crooked like them in the future." The Empress picked up a newspaper from the couch. The golden retriever called out and made a paper smaller dried fruit to him. She had learned this from Rinpoche. Keep it for yourself. Following which, after the Empress raised her hand, speaking, the golden retriever immediately jumped down diagonally. Chin-Chin's neck and hid the dried fruit in its fur. He placed it in front of his nose and sniffed it. Rinpoche couldn't help but shake his head. There was also the Empress's fragrance. Called 2 guards to follow him to change the light bulbs of the street lamps. And it's published by the students of the school. The plaza between Beihong District and Julian District was crowded gossip to arouse the interest of the blazing sun in the sky didn't reduce the enthusiasm of literate people around the plaza. I plan to post the daily on the streets and find a mobilized to keep the onlookers away. This way, even if the commoners are illiterate, they will know what's written on it. A passerby who was carrying goods asked in confusion when he saw the situation. Paper down. I don't know. Then he picked up that Her Majesty will be here in a while. The person who was called rotated them a few times, and the skin of the fruit fell off. I don't know the exact time, looked at it from every angle and nodded his head in satisfaction. Upon hearing this, the passerby started to hesitate. Just right, not 1 inch more or 1 inch less. If it was 1 inch more important to deliver the goods, or if it was 1 inch less, it would be too thin. These 2 thoughts battled intensely in his mind for 2 seconds. His knife technique and the thought of waiting to see the Empress in the future, he could get a title like the first blade of wind and waves of cheers sounded better than the stinky Emperor. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Rinpoche handed the fruit to the Empress, and she praised. Chaotic shouts spread throughout the plaza. Is much better than before. Upon hearing this voice, not at all, everyone knew that the Empress had arrived. Your ability to control your body when drawing a circle is beyond my reach. And the Empress's imperial carriage, which was followed by 2 rows of guards, just by looking at the plaza. Rinpoche was overjoyed and court officials. Flattery in business required reciprocity. Your Majesty. Otherwise, who would play with you? As the curtain of the imperial carriage was lifted for the Empress everyone to continue saw the Empress get up and step out of the carriage. Really not bad. And there was another round of cheers. When I was 5 years old, I probably did Her Majesty is really loved and respected. The Empress held the fruit in her hand and spun it in front of her eyes. Because Her Majesty is the most beautiful treasure of Empress squinted at Rinpoche's depressed expression. He then looked at Rinpoche with a crescent said, and her gaze was full of smiles. Her Majesty taking a fancy to you is the greatest blessing in your life. 8 small pieces. Because of the many decrees issued by Her Majesty, one of the pieces flew into Rinpoche's has been lightened. Take a seat. Her Majesty is the Empress of the Aboriginals, Rinpoche pulled the chair over and sat beside the couch. He pulled the Empress's hand over everyone and placed it against their mounts and looked up at the cement building that was about 60 meters to each other. The building was very rough and didn't have much decoration. He always felt that the Aboriginal's hand was very delicate and soft. It would meet their aesthetic standards. It was as if she could touch his heart. At 60 meters tall and 67 meters, he could even feel the Empress's strong, the tallest man-made building in the world. I can feel your Majesty's heartbeat, and your Majesty can also feel my heartbeat. In the end, this is called mutual affinity. A layer of colorful stones of different sizes both of them calmed down and felt each other's heartbeat, giving the bell tower a dreamy look. Sped up a little. At this time, the surrounding top of the bell tower was completely covered with the Empress's favorite red Your Majesty's lip balm. Ever since the clock was installed, forward no one had seen close to the Empress's. The next second, a tubular object was stuffed into Rinpoche's mouth. The Empress's eyes curved into crescent moons. Chapter 673. You can eat it all. The wooden door at the bottom of the clock tower was open. He took out the lip balm from his mouth and finished it in one mouthful, 2 mouthfuls. The one in front was the old man that Rinpoche had met before. Rinpoche exclaimed. He was Zhang Junjing's elder and the current leader of the Zhang family in another tube of lip balm was stuffed into his mouth. Forward and cupped his hands. The Empress stretched out her hand and your Majesty and lip balm appeared between her fingers. Are the adjustments complete? You bought 50 tubes for me last time. Forward and asked. Forget it. The old man and the people behind him were originally suppressing their excitement. But the Empress looked at Rinpoche and there seemed to be something in her eyes. So Ren, everything is ready. Extended her head in another 15 minutes. The first bell will ring. The soft and gentle touch only lasted for a moment before the blueprint of the clock tower. The lip balm on Your Majesty's mechanical structure inside were completely completed by the Zhang held the empty tube in his hand. It was a great honor for the Zhang family to have this clock tower appear with a smile. As long as this clock tower existed, the name of the Zhang family would be remembered in my life. Even if this clock tower was gone, the name of the Zhang family would definitely be mentioned in the history books in the future. Rinpoche moved closer to the Empress, about going down in history just like kissed her gently. At this time, the Zhang family was really impressed and the hot air between their noses brushed against each other's face. Took out could benefit the Zhang family's craftsmen, and they could even gain a great reputation. Retracted his head as fast as he could. It was really not a loss to work for such a person. It's really sweet. Just don't make any mistakes. The Empress snorted and blushed, but she wasn't annoyed at all. Sir Ren, don't worry. She pretended as if nothing had happened and changed it many times in the residence. The candy on the tree has been checking the clock tower yesterday and there are no problems. Look at the tree. I can guarantee with my head gone, but even the branches were gone. Keep your head. Only a bare trunk was left still a dead object and isn't as important as your head. The freshly minted Lon City shook his head. A shocking secret is about to be revealed. Talents in this world. The grudge between the Minister of Works and the Minister of War. The old man City Daily. Rinpoche, the Minister of War, and the Minister of War. After all, it felt good to be valued. This issue of Lon City when the other party was an expert in this field. It seemed like it wasn't a newspaper seller coming from outside the wall. Calculate the time and remind me when there's still 15 minutes left. Newspapers weren't new to Zhang Junjing since they existed in the Yun Nation. The old man looked up at the Yun Nation's newspapers were mainly printed by the imperial court and distributed to the warlords' residences. The others were also sizing up the colorful clock tower. They were mostly about decorations on the surface made this major events a little different from the rough style ordinary people had always see them at all. However, this Lon City sunlight was completely different. Various colors of light, which was a kind of dreamy color. In addition to some major events, it also had a lot of gossip about the officials in the imperial court. The Empress Zhang Junjing felt that the Lon City Daily that had just appeared actually had both advantages and disadvantages on top of the clock tower. The advantage was that it made the common people feel more familiar to watch the stars from the imperial court and felt that the officials were actually doing such things. At the same time, it allowed many officials who weren't well understood to enter the eyes of the common people. The roof is fine. The disadvantage was that the officials in the imperial court in the observatory and the starry sky will be even more beautiful. The Black Bamboo Academy's chief was hasn't seen creating the telescope yet. A moment later, astronomical telescopes can zoom in on the starry sky by 100 or even 1,000 times. The first page was the battle report of the Yun Nation. We can drink under the stars and enjoy the scenery of the night sky. Published 3 days after the previous issue. When the Empress heard 3 days, she felt the Yun Nation had lost another 4 cities. Then I would like to take a look. Zhang Junjing estimated that this was actually news from 3 to 6 days ago. Rinpoche, this was because it would take at least 3 days to travel from the Yun Nation to Lan City, even with the help of a yawning bird. Were like needles. However, when he heard that the Yun Nation had lost cities one after another as if they didn't have the strength to retaliate, are you guys going to bite me? Satisfaction. I want to whisper in front of all of you. About it recently. Rinpoche simply didn't retract his head. Dayo's goal didn't seem to be to plunder. He moved his lips closer to the Empress's ear. If they were to plunder, placing his head on her shoulder. Dayo's goal should have already been achieved. Many people around him were enraged. They had captured a quarter of the Yun Nation cities, had chosen which was enough for them to plunder more than once. There was also no need to send spies into the various cities to spy on the news. The Empress noticed had a feeling that Dayo's goal this time was to occupy the entire Yun Nation. Many people are envious of me. Would the Yun Nation give them a chance to be jealous? Although the Zhang family was almost driven out, Zhang Junjing still felt a little sad when he thought about the fall of his homeland. It will be past noon and the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. Did Dayo have those officials to send to the Yun Nation? You will be the one to remove the red cloth in a while. He was afraid that the Yun Nation would become a quagmire that would continuously swallow Dayo's energy and military strength. Just pull this rope downward. Zhang Junjing was slightly lost in thought as he pointed to a thin rope hanging from the next page. There's no need. The largest page at the Empress didn't even look at the grudges between Tong Jinye, she calculated the time in her mind, Qin Chuan, the minister lightly on the ground, after reading it into the sky like a red cloud. Vomited blood. As she swept not only him but everyone else, the circle of red cloth was also blood after reading the newspaper along with her. Everyone knew that Tong Jinye and Qin Chuan were completely made in brass, was completely revealed to everyone and emitted a golden luster. And there were also many fights in the imperial court. The melodious sound of the bell even rang if they were beaten up by the Empress in the prologue had they would rather be beaten up than let the other party go. They would rather perish together with the other party and melodiously drifted through the city. One after another, it was like a musical note falling from the sky. After reading the newspaper, Tong Jinye burst into laughter. It gave off a sacred feeling and amazed everyone. Said to be the proudest whether it was the public order officials, the surrounding commoners, someone to remember it and even other corners of Lan City. They all looked up at the sound of the bell. He remembered that it was the spring of the 36th year even though the Empress was standing at the top of the clock tower. The first Emperor Dayo was overshadowed by 60,000 mountains with the brave warriors and many so-called clock tower. There was no news of them after that. The new emperor had just ascended the throne, and Great Xia was eyeing the north of Dayo side from below. During this period, there's no need to look at the weapons that Dayo obtained. As long as you're in Lan City, you can see the clock tower and look up and know the time. The important ministers and veterans had all disappeared and were replaced by some young officials who had just been promoted of the clock, which can be lit in other aspects. And it could be said that this was the most dangerous time for Dayo. From Great Xia and the Yun Nation to take a look and ask them if they can make 60,000 mountains to join the army or the court. He was looking forward to seeing the reaction of people who came to Lan City and saw this clock tower. He often fought with others and made some enemies. Don't have it. However, this is the only one in this world. The old man from the Zhang family said the two of them got to know each other through fighting. However, if they later on they went to Lan City to figure it out after coincidentally the recruitment quota was full. It doesn't matter. And the group of 7 or 8 figure it out, we will already have lived in abandoned houses in the city and didn't even have food to eat. That depends on Sir Ren. A few of them decided to dine and dash. In fact, the Ministry of Works is the most suitable for Sir Ren. In the end, the others didn't put down their pride and went all the way to the Yun Nation to join the Ministry of Staff. Now, they were all serving in the Protectorate of the Northeast. People raised their heads, and one of them was the Protectorate of the Northeast Deputy Protector General. Every time the clock chimed on the hour, they would burst into cheers. To dine and dash. Most of them felt that there must be a few people inside the clock tower. You look like you're here to join the army. Hands on the clock tower. The recruitment quota was full a few days ago. Began to gradually if you don't have a place to go, after nightfall, for dinner, the braziers on both sides of the clock tower lit up. The person who said this was a girl who was 17 or 18 years old. The entire clock her skin was a little rough. The people in the city who had already been amazed by the clock tower for the whole day were once again amazed by the clock tower in the night. One had to know that such a small shop could only the bottom of the clock tower and make much money. Light in the night You're here to join the army for half a month in a row. The citizens of Lan City who had nothing better to do after nightfall to beat their children and clap for their loved ones, you two can't possibly in their courtyards for the rest of your lives. Looked up at the clock tower in the distance. The girl laughed heartily, beat their children at that moment, and then returned to their houses to clap for their loved ones. And the shadows struck the hearts of the two young men. I want to take her as my wife. Qin Chuan said under the sunlight Chapter after walking out of the restaurant. Rinpoche walked up to the podium and placed the book on the table. He looked down and saw an empty seat in the middle. After that, the two of them mingled around Lan City for a few days and became familiar with that lady. They also learned that the lady's name was Tai Mushin. With their decent expression didn't improve. The two of them were recognized and entered the Ministry of Works. Teacher, he can't come. With their identities, it was even easier for them to run to the store when he saw Su Peng's expression. Both of them had a good impression of Tai Mushin. It was just that Qin Chuan family should already know about it, and his actions were more obvious. There was no need to hide it anymore, so he said, was gradually moved by him. Tong Jinye wanted to show off a few times. The other students were also in an uproar and looked at Su Peng with their mouths agape. Qin Chuan and Time Machine began to flirt with each other. Immediately because of this matter, Tang Jinya had been very vexed for a period of time. At that time, both he and the Empress saw it very clearly. Of a young man. Until one day Tang Jinya told him that there was a young expert in Qinchuan but he didn't expect Du Laolu to be so ruthless and elope. Then Qin Chuan went to challenge him and suffered a crushing defeat. Ren Baqin asked. After that, Tang Jinya yesterday afternoon a martial arts manual that he had obtained by chance and said, "You are not strong enough for a while. How are you going to marry the person you like? About Tuyu's family background?" Even though Qin Chuan was already considered an assistant in the Ministry of Justice and a secondary class, who had just suffered a crushing defeat, Tu Hong and the Minister of Revenue, Tu Wan, then he took the martial arts manual and plunged into the world of martial arts. His family background was similar to Tuyu's, the number of times the most Chuan went to see Tai Muxin gradually decreased. As for the girl with the surname Shi, he was so engrossed in martial arts that he couldn't extricate himself. Du Laolu and the girl's elopement, on the other hand, put in a lot of effort to find martial arts family into the mud. Both Every sides time Qin Chuan finished practicing, it was still unknown whether the two of them could escape. Tang Jinya would give him another one. If they didn't succeed, over the course of 3.5 years, if they succeeded, Qin Chuan would have to give up on his studies and fade into the mass techniques. Would be a pity. If that was all, the two of them were indeed good friends. Ren Baqin felt a little regretful. Qin Chuan was extremely grateful. He originally thought that Tang Jinya had made some progress. 3.5 years later, when Qin Chuan, who felt that he had been reborn, came out of the world of martial arts. Tai Muxin and Tang Jinya were already engaged. Ren Baqin collected his thoughts and slapped the table. Qin Chuan was in a bad mood. However, the people below didn't have the mood to listen to the lecture. Qin Chuan still didn't suspect Tang Jinya. All of them were whispering to each other and winking at each other. Good. Usually, Ren Baqin would use a gun and bullets to teach them what classroom discipline was. In the end, he plunged into the world of martial arts for more than 3 years. After only during this period of time, an angry female voice could be heard from outside. One day, not long after that, Principal Ren Chuan was drinking in a restaurant. Needless to say, someone had come looking for him. The young expert who defeated Qin Chuan were next door. Table and said in that person was called Hong Wu. Read the book yourself first. Even at that time, as he walked out, the classroom immediately burst into an uproar. He was just happy with his good friend's success. A bunch of people crowded at the door and in front of the bed looking outside. Who are you? That was until Tang Jinya and Hong Wu let it slip after drinking. When Ren Baqin arrived at the entrance of the academy, he saw a lady in her 40s and Tang Jinya turned from good friends to enemies. She was wearing a wide-sleeved robe with 5 or 6 died a few years later due to excessive blood loss after giving birth that the two of them became mortal enemies. Knew that they couldn't barge into the academy. Never married, and neither did Principal Ren, my daughter. The two of them lingered in brothels and by Du Laolu every time they saw each other until now. Sometimes I want to ask him or my daughter why they fought. The lady angrily recalled these old events. It just so happens that Du Laolu appeared on his weathered to an unknown place. Although he tricked Madame Chuan, he didn't regret it at all. The rules of the academy must still be tricking Qin Chuan into marrying truant without reason will be punished. Every time he thought about it, he would happily drink a jar of wine. You are asking me for him? Tang Jinya, you still don't know who to look for. Come and fight me for 300 rounds. The lady asked in an overbearing tone. The Ministry of Works. If you can get the warrant from Her Majesty, you can come in and look for him. He must have seen the newspaper unhappily as he stood at the door. Everyone in the Ministry of Works. The lady carefully looked at Ren Baqin's was so sinister in the past. Her face darkened. Wasn't Minister Qin too stupid? Principal Ren was so obsessed with martial arts that he lost his wife. Ren Baqin cursed in his heart. He will fight you to the death. Do you think I'm a scapegoat? Haha. Why are you actually dared to provoke the Ministry of Works? You are only looking for your daughter now that she's gone. Today, I must capture you and bring you to Her Majesty. I even lost a student. Tang Jinya laughed out loud after a year of my education. She's a talent who carried a hammer that weighed more than 150 kilograms and went out. I only found out about the matter between Qin Chuan and Tang Jinya turned around and entered the courtyard. I didn't expect it to be like this. Close the door. The Empress put the newspaper aside and sighed. The students who were originally blocking the door of the newspaper made her feel a little strange in a panic. It seemed to be sympathy for Qin Chuan. Found Ren Baqin no wonder Sir Tong. Teacher, love is like a battlefield, and the first priority is to defeat the enemy. And he even said that he would propose marriage to make Sir family after he achieved some results. In the end, strength is still the most important thing in Sir Qin's eyes. Ren Baqin said with a smile. If Su Peng had looked for him previously, he might have been able to help. He now that Du Laolu had run away, making her feel as if she had been electrocuted. Felt that Ren Baqin's words Your Majesty, Minister Qin and Minister Tong are fighting outside the Ministry of Works with a heavy heart. Ex-Anja came in to report. Ren Baqin shook his head when he saw the trouble caused by your newspaper. He wasn't too worried. The Empress rolled her eyes at Ren Baqin. The youngsters of the Aboriginals weren't like the youngsters what happened to them. Couldn't differentiate between the time and ignore them. In any case, it was rare for the Empress to be soft-hearted and were much stronger than ordinary. Half of the Ministry of Works has been demolished. As long as they didn't two of them are demolishing the Ministry of Rights, they wouldn't be in much danger. Next to the Ministry of Rights, it all depended on when the two of them would be caught and brought back. Continued. Many of the Aboriginals were originally hunters in the mountains. She originally wanted to spare the two of them, but this time she couldn't even spare them. Ren Baqin wasn't optimistic that the two of them would be together after eloping. Chapter 666. And it was only a matter of time before they were caught and brought back. We can't
After
possibly
returning
play
to the
with
palace
these every day.
Rinpoche
Let's find
first
something
asked
new.
for the empress's
In
whereabouts.
a villa on Shi Mountain
She was
in
still
Shanghai,
discussing with the
12
ministers
winged
about
cavalry
Great
warriors
Xia's
sat in
movements
the living
in
room
imperial
looking
court.
bored.
This
They
was
practiced
because
martial
Great
arts
Xia's
and drank
movements
every
over
day
the past
and it
half
was
a
really
month
boring
seemed to be
after a
very
long time.
aggressive on the surface.
Tiny one, is there
They had been
anything fun to
attacking the
play?
cities non-stop
Poker.
for more than half a
Fight the
month.
landlord?
But the
Ding Jie
500,000
shifted his
soldiers
gaze away
surrounding
from
the
the
three
tablet.
cities hadn't made
I've
much
played it
progress
before.
for more than half
It's
a
not
month.
fun.
This
The
was somewhat
winged cavalry
suspicious.
warrior shook
In the
his head.
previous battle,
Fight the
Ziwa
landlord?
city was breached in
Mahjong?
just one night.
Ding Jie
The
asked.
deputy protector
too
general
troublesome.
was besieged
My
by
head
many
feels like
experts
it's going
and
to
died on the
explode when I
spot.
play.
With
One
such
of
a
them said,
comparison, the problem
everyone
could be
nodded.
seen. What do you
After
guys
returning
want
to
to play
Pingle
then?
Park,
Ding
Rinpoche
Jie asked
gave
helplessly.
Tian and Gun
He had
Gun,
already
who were
figured
about
out
to
the
pounce
nature
on
of his
him,
group of
a
people
slap
over the
each.
past 2 years.
Then he strolled
To
to
put
a
it
lake in the
nicely, they were
palace.
straightforward,
The lake
but to
wasn't
put it
considered
bluntly,
big
they were
and
stupid.
its diameter was
I
less
want
than
to chop
300
someone up.
meters.
There
One of the
weren't any
winged cavalry
waterside
warriors
pavilions or
sighed.
pavilions on
I want to
it,
do that
and
too.
it was surrounded
My
by a
hands are
circle
itchy
of trees.
since I haven't chopped
Through the
someone
clear
up
lake
in a long
water,
time.
Rinpoche
Another
could see a
winged
guy with a
cavalry
body
warrior
full of
was
green
inspired
scales
by
lying
his
at the bottom
words.
of the lake.
Chopping the person in the
Rinpoche
knife in
first
half
found
with
a
one
comfortable
slash
place
would
to
be a
sit.
great life.
It was a rock
Another
that
winged
protruded from the
cavalry
shore.
warrior laughed
He
heartily.
felt pretty good as he
Everyone
sat there
began
and
to
enjoyed the
reminisce about
surrounding
the days on
brightness.
the battlefield.
Then he shouted,
Whether it was
chopping
Chishui,
someone up or being
at the
chopped
bottom
up,
of the lake
it was
the
always
Kirin
so
that
refreshing.
Rinpoche had ridden
Even though they
before.
drank and ate
However,
meat every
it
day, their
plunged
days
into the
were
lake
extremely
after
dull.
returning to Daeyo.
Ding Jie's face turned
Rinpoche
green
would
as he
occasionally
listened to
come
the
to take a look
conversation.
when he had nothing
What
to do,
exactly did
but
these
he had
mountain
never seen
kids
it come out.
experience in the
Rinpoche
past?
sat on the
He
shore and
trembled
muttered,
with fear as
everyone
he listened
has
to
some
everyone's
ideals or
discussion.
dreams.
He moved
When they
from
are
the
young,
sofa
their
to the
dreams
ground,
become
then to
desires
the
when
back
they
of the
grow up.
sofa.
There
He
are
then
always some
curled up,
things that they want to
afraid
do
that
from
this
the
group
bottom
of
of their
bears would
hearts.
take out their knives
Humans
and
are
chop
like
him up
this,
in the
so
next
is the
second.
Kirin, right?
While everyone
Even
was
if it's to pull a
discussing,
cart
someone
or be
slapped his
amount,
thigh and
it should
said,
have something that it
I
wants
just
to
thought
do,
of something
right?
fun. For example,
What do we
a
play?
tall, rich, and
Everyone
handsome
looked
man
over.
who pulls a cart or
Don't
a
we have
heavenly
so
king
many
who
guns?
rides. There's
Look
a
at
game
you
called
stay at
Battle
the
Royale
bottom
in
of
the
this
lake
world.
every day and don't
Each
come
of
out
you
even
will
once
hold
a
a
year.
gun and will die
I'm
if you
afraid
get
that
hit.
moss will grow on
Whoever
your body.
doesn't get hit in the end
Fortunately, you're in
wins.
the water.
What do you think?
Otherwise, your
That
body
person
would stink.
suggested.
Do you know
Sounds
that
good.
humans who stay at
One of
home
them
every
nodded.
day are called otakus?
Everyone became excited
What should
after
a
hearing
Kirin be
this,
called if
and
it
someone
hides in its
immediately
nest
went to
every
bring
day?
back a box of guns
Otakus?
and bullets.
Speaking of which,
How do we
I
use
still
this?
don't know if you are
Someone
male or
reached out
female.
and picked Ding Jie
You didn't
up
let
from
me
behind
take a
the
look
sofa.
back then.
Ding Jie
Do you
was
have
shocked.
anything you want to
What
eat?
else do you guys
For
want?
example,
Playing
sashimi?
Battle Royale
I
with real
recommend
guns?
dipping it in wasabi.
Why aren't you guys flying?
Horseradish
If
isn't
he
bad
taught
either.
them, would the lady
I
boss
quite
beat
like
him
the
to death
pungent
when she
taste
came
of
back?
horseradish. He would
Give
probably
me a
beat him
scale
to death,
and I'll treat you to
He
sashimi.
absolutely could not
How
teach
about
them.
that?
I don't
After
know
nagging
either.
for an hour,
You lied to
Rinpoche
me.
got up,
More than
feeling
a dozen
little
man
bored.
bears moved their faces closer. How could you not know? I'll see you in
Only
2 days.
people in the army can
Think
use
about
this.
it carefully. How can a student
After
like me know this?
Rinpoche left,
Ding
Jie
Jie
denied
opened
with
its
a long
eyes at the
face.
bottom of the lake. It was like a light
You're
bulb
really
at the bottom of the
useless.
lake, and
Everyone
its eyes
had a
were
look
full
of
of contempt
distress
on their faces. Ding Jie had a bitter expression on his face, but he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. No
Chapter
matter what,
675.
it was fine as long as
On
they
the
were
vast
not allowed to play
grassland,
this game.
tens of thousands
I can
of
use
four-corned
this.
cows and jumping
One of
goats
the
were
winged
spread out
cavalry
and gnawing on
warriors
the
said as he
vegetation
picked
on
up
the
a
ground.
flash bullet from
The
a
sound
box.
of hooves could be
I
heard,
know that too.
and a group of
Back
cavalrymen
then, we used
riding
this to break
four-corned
into the
cows
city,
appeared
and it
at
was
the edge
indeed
of the
very
grassland.
useful. The leader
Everyone
of the
suddenly
group was a
thought of the
bald,
time when
burly
they
man.
attacked Tianjin Basin.
His eyes scanned
Shall
the
we
entire
play this?
grassland like
One
a
of the
falcon
winged
and
cavalry
paused at a certain
warriors
spot.
suggested.
Have
How
you
do we
found
play?
any traces
The
of
others
them?
asked. A lady
I
behind
remember
him
that
asked.
this thing takes a
No,
few breaths to
the
explode.
burly man replied in
Let's
a
sit
deep
around
voice.
this hall and pass it
He
around
then
one
lowered
by
his
one.
head to identify
Whoever
the traces
blows it
on the
up will
ground,
be unlucky.
pointed in a
The
direction
winged
and
cavalry
said,
warrior
they went
said,
in that direction.
Interesting.
Chase after
Let's
them.
do this. Subsequently,
The others
this
laughed
group of
heartily
people flew
and
into the
immediately
distance
made the
like a
decision.
dark cloud. Ding Jie,
After a
who was
long
at the
time,
side,
a few
had just
four-corned
heaved a sigh
cows
of
that
relief
had gathered
when
in
his
a
heart
certain
immediately
place on the
jumped out of
grassland
his
dispersed,
throat. Not only
revealing a
did
young
his
man
face
and
turn
woman who
green,
were about
but it also
17 or
turned 18 years old. Masters, can I call you masters? The man pulled the woman. Can't you play something normal people play? After fleeing for a long time, you can't play with it. Fell directly onto the grass. Ding Jie immediately jumped up from the ground and discovered with a distorted face. The woman was about 17 or 18 years old, and the winged cavalry warrior said in disdain. She wasn't considered like you don't know these things, but she was very attractive outside of Lan City. Ding Jie looked at it carefully and found that it was indeed different from the ordinary people could see on television. The woman wasn't considered extremely beautiful, fine as long as she had a wild and heroic spirit. Thinking about his unique to Aboriginal women. The 12 winged cavalry warriors there was a trace of excitedly guessed for a long time before the man had a short layer of hair according to the order. Scalp. We will start when you give the order, thick eyebrows and big eyes. He was dressed in dark-colored clothes. If possible, after he didn't even want them to play with this. His originally youthful face. It was a pity that he couldn't beat them, and they could strangle 10 of him with one hand. After hearing the woman's words, since this was the case, but he felt that they had been discovered just now. In that case, the person leading the group was the resident's guard. There was something similar to a flash bullet called a stun grenade, so he pretended not to see. One of the winged cavalry warriors held a stun grenade in his hand. He first pulled out the ring and then tightly gripped the handle.
and the chances of them escaping were very small. Ding Jie looked at the 12 pairs of eyes that were staring at him and said reluctantly, instead he felt unreconciled and guilty towards the people around him. As soon as he finished speaking, for him, the other person immediately had to flee with him from a luxurious life in the second residence, who then threw it into the hands of the third person. Shi Jiyue held his hand tightly and consoled him. Was extremely fast. The trace of fear on her face disappeared in an instant and was replaced by a sense of determination. Within 5 seconds, we will definitely escape. The stun grenade had been passed around the 12 people's hands. Tightly. Regardless of whether it was for himself or Shi Jiyue, an intense flash suddenly resounded throughout the villa. Shi Jiyue in the instant that the stun grenade exploded, if we were ordinary the 12 people closed their eyes. You wouldn't be criticized because of your talent. However, it was already I wouldn't be forced to marry out. It was as if I would be able to live an ordinary life like in front of everyone's eyes. That's also something I yearned for. Anything other than a patch of white. Along with the intense flash was a huge sound wave that reached 170 decibels, and he tightened his grip on Shi Jiyue's hand. Everyone felt as if they were being hit by something. The 19 Rivers is just one more day to the south. Their heads were being continuously smashed by stones, and they felt a strong sense of dizziness. After the two of them rested for a while, all the glass items in the villa were shattered, including the TV that Rinpoche had just bought. Two of them were drenched in sweat. It was also destroyed by the explosion of the stun grenade. They had originally estimated that they would reach the 19th river in a day and a night. He felt as if his head had been hit by a sledgehammer when that huge sound wave hit him. They had no choice but to change their route. He only managed to curse in his heart before fainting. In the end, after a day and a night, outside the villa, the members of the Messier 87 department who were monitoring the villa were shocked by the explosion of the intense flash and the huge sound wave. Other than that period of time when they weren't monitoring the villa at night in order to make the enemy agents let their guard down, to drag him along. There were people outside the villa 24 hours a day. We are almost there. What's going on? Shi Jiyue gritted her teeth as she climbed with all her might. Enemy attack. Even she felt her body go limp at this point, and she was almost at the end of her rope. Noodles, the two of them had been on the run for 4 whole days. When they rushed into the last 2 days, they basically didn't eat anything and only ate some wild with their eyes wide along the way to fill their stomachs. The physical fitness of the winged cavalry warriors was much better than that of consumption of their bodies. Although the flash caused them to lose their vision for a while, they had already recovered by the time the Messier 87 department rushed in. She wouldn't have been able to hold on. The problem now was that their clothes were covered in mud and many heads were a little dizzy. Were tattered. What happened? They looked much more pathetic than they had a day ago. The leader rushed in after dragging Du Laolu to the top of the hill. He realized that apart from these people, collapsed to the ground. No sign of the enemy. Shi Jiyue struggled to stand. The dozen winged cavalry warriors came back to their senses and glared at him fiercely. We are not far from the 19 rivers. The leader asked nervously. We just need to cross this forest in front of us. The dozen winged cavalry warriors continued to look fierce. My ears are buzzing and I can't successfully escape, one of them said. Du Laolu said with difficulty as another person asked. What are you talking about? You can't cross the forest. Asked. The members of the Messier 87 department looked at the human bears with a look of despair. Apart from the beginning, no one paid any attention to them. When he saw the figure walking out of the forest, asking each other questions, and the entire room was filled with the same phrase, "You have really done well." There was no enemy, angrily, and only a dozen of them were surrounded by the stun grenade. Struggled to kneel on the ground. What exactly happened? Go where? Where can you go? If you can escape from the pursuit of so many people, I can still look up to you. The wind is really noisy today. Do you think you can hide from others? Pushed open the window frame has already set up a trap by the river and is waiting for you. There was no physical change from warm to cold. So that we can at least save some face. This was because there was no difference whether the window frame was pushed open or not. His voice was filled with resentment that they didn't meet his expectations. However, Rinpoche's current state of mind made him want to do this action. 3 days later, the haggard Du Laolu and Shi Jiyue were tied to their mounts and escorted back to Lan City. In front of her was a group of winged cavalry warriors with their heads lowered. The more apprehensive they felt. These bears were as obedient when they were about to reach the city gates of Lan City. But from the situation in the house, it could be seen that when the Empress wasn't around, they were like happy huskies. His good friend Su Peng, a few other students from the academy, had demolished half of the Ministry of Works. Half of the Ministry of Rights, and 1/3 of the Ministry of Revenue. As a result, his eyes were filled with complex emotions, admiration, and hatred. They really used to like you very much. Anywhere. Tuyu's voice was very trouble for her and demolishing everywhere. But I have always liked you. Could they do anything that made her happy? Was frosty. Bury them all. A strange smile appeared on Tuyu's face. Her aura was so strong that they didn't dare to move at all. Even though such a thing has happened, I will still marry you. Ding Jie felt as if they were being pressed down by a mountain. His laughter was filled with coldness. The winged cavalry warriors knew what was happening, but Ding Jie was still confused and couldn't understand where this feeling of being pressed down by a mountain came from. 2 families' faces. The weather is really suitable for burying people. I really like to see you struggle like bugs with their tails to the gloomy sky outside the window and powerless and can only struggle in the garage. Go get them yourself and dig 13 pits in the courtyard. The winner can marry Shi Jiyue. 1 pit for each of you so that it won't be crowded down there. He knew that if nothing changed, Shi Jiyue would definitely marry Tuyu. I'm innocent. Tuyu might have loved Shi Jiyue in the past, but his words just now made him realize that he would definitely take revenge. He wanted to stop
couldn't
them,
let
but he
Shirjiu
couldn't.
marry to you,
Lady boss,
even if
don't
it
you
meant
know what
death.
kind of people those mountain
Useless.
kids are?
What a disgrace.
That day he fainted,
A man
woke
sitting
up,
on a
fainted
mount
behind
woke up and got married
scolded
again.
angrily
If
when
it
he heard
wasn't
his
for the
roar.
people from the Messier
However, he didn't
87
stop
department who
Dulalu.
dragged him out and
Our
sent him to the
marriage has
hospital.
already been
He
decided.
would probably be deaf
To you
by now.
smiled.
His
Regardless
ears weren't
of whether
working
I'll
well
accept
now.
the duel or
Those
not,
bastards
I will
used up
marry
8
Shirjiu.
flash bombs in one night.
What are you going to use to
Even the
challenge
people
me?
from the Messier
Do you have the
87
capital?
department were
You are
shocked
just a
because
useless
several
person.
of them were sent to the
Even
hospital.
the person you like is
Ren
already
Bachin
engaged to
pondered
me.
for a while.
You have nothing.
It was fine if those winged cavalry warriors were buried, but if Ding Jie was buried, it would really be over. Forget it, Ding Jie has nothing to do with this time, so I'll let him off. You were the one who proposed the duel, and the two families agreed to it.
Turned around, leaned
The duel
against
will
the
be held
windowsill,
in a week,
and looked at
you
the
are not
winged
allowed to
cavalry
go out
warriors
until
who
then.
were as obedient as
Du
kittens.
Lao's father
The
threw him
Empress
into the
withdrew
room
her
and said
aura,
to him,
and the winged
before leaving
cavalry
the room,
warriors
he
felt
thought of
as if
something
they
and
had been
turned to look
pardoned
at
from
Du
a crime.
Laolu. You are really useless.
They
However,
quickly
I
went to
sent
the
you to the
garage
Black
to get a
Bamboo
shovel to dig
Academy
a
so that
hole.
you can defeat
Boss,
others
I really
one day,
stopped them.
not so that
They
you
were
can
going to
keep
play
losing.
battle royale with their guns.
He turned around
but I
and
stopped
slammed
them
the
and
door.
turned them into flash
Send
grenades.
him 3 meals a day
Who
and
knew
don't
that
allow
the
him to go
explosion
out.
of a flash grenade
Sir,
would be
someone
so
from the
powerful.
Su family wants to see
Ding
him.
Jie looked depressed.
Let him in.
Forget it.
A moment later,
Ren
Su
Bachin
Ping
waved
rushed
his
into
hand.
Du Lao's room
He knew
and
that
shouted
Ding Jie
anxiously,
wouldn't be able to stop
"Are
the
you
winged
crazy?"
cavalry.
Tu Yu
Ren
has the
Bachin
strength
turned
of a
around and
Kismet
looked
heaven
out of the
expert.
window.
Although
More
he
than
hasn't
10
been there
winged
for
cavalry
long, you
warriors
can't
came
compare
into
to
the
him.
courtyard with a
Du
few
Laolu
shovels.
said expressionlessly,
In just a short while,
I know,
they had
I'm
dug
crazy.
13 pits
I've
that
been
were
crazy
1
for
meter
a long
wide
time.
and 2 meters deep.
I would only elope
They even
with
dug
Jiwei
out
if I were
yours.
crazy.
It seems
but
like
I have
they
to be
approve
crazy
of you.
this time.
Ren
If Jiwei
Bachin said
marries
to
to
Ding
you,
Jie,
he will definitely
I don't
not
need
let
your
her
approval
off.
at a time like this.
What should we do now?
Ding Jie's
Your
face
duel
turned
is in a
green.
week.
Why
You
didn't you
won't be
guys
able to
approve of
defeat
me
him
like this
even after a
usually?
year. Why did
Let
you guys
alone in
think of
such a
me
short
when you have to
time?
take the blame?
Su Ping
Let
paced
them
around
jump
the
in
room
and bury
worriedly.
them.
Leave
beg
their
you for
heads
a favor.
outside.
Ren
Du
Bachin
Laolu
said.
sat in front of the table
Ding
and held
Jie
his
looked
head
bitter.
with one hand.
How would he dare
Su
to
Ping
do that?
stopped pacing
If
and
he
looked
did
at
that,
Du
wouldn't
Laolu.
this group of people
Say,
hammer him to death
I will
later?
definitely help if
Moreover,
I can.
wouldn't leaving his
Du
head
Laolu
outside
raised
really
his
kill
head
him?
and said seriously,
I
Ren
should have gone
Bachin's voice
personally,
was
but
flat,
I can't go out.
but it sounded
Let
like
me
a
ask
clap of
Yagwei.
thunder in Ding
You must
Jie's
have a
ears.
way.
No matter
Su
how
Ping hammered
casual
his
Ren
bald
Bachin
head.
usually was,
This was a
he
solution.
still had the aura
There was
of a
no doubt
high-ranking
that
person.
Yagwei's strength
When
was
he got
low.
serious,
A year
it made
ago,
an
he
ordinary
couldn't even
person like
defeat a
Ding Jie
child.
feel fear.
However,
and
he
Yagwei
quickly
had a
ran
lot
out
of
of
good
the
stuff
house.
in his hands.
What did the
If
lady
he could
boss
get a
say?
few of them, he
The
might
winged
be able to
cavalry
win.
warriors asked
All
when
right.
they saw him run
Su
out.
Ping immediately nodded.
Ding Jie didn't know
I will
what to
ask
say.
Yagwei tomorrow.
He dug a hole for
The
himself
next morning,
and wanted to bury
Su
them.
Ping was
How
surrounded
would
by
this
many
group of people
students
look
when he
at him?
arrived at the academy.
Say it. The
Du
winged
Laolu was
cavalry
caught.
warriors urged.
Although he was caught,
Everyone,
he still
the lady
acts like a
boss
man.
said to bury all of you
He challenged
and leave
to
your
you.
heads outside.
He's definitely not
Ding
Tu's
Jie said
match.
bitterly to the
What is
winged
he
cavalry
thinking?
warriors.
What do you think?
He was already
in
prepared
this kind
to
of
be
situation,
resented by
even
these
if
people.
they died, they had to fight.
You still have
He
your heads
abducted
outside.
Shirjiue and
To
ended up
his
being
surprise,
caught.
this group of
Now
people
Tuyu
wasn't
hates Shirjiue
dissatisfied
too.
at all.
If Du Laolu
Instead,
were
they
to
happily
cower
found
now,
a hole
I
to
would look
jump
down
into.
on him.
Ding Jie was
That's
tongue-tied
enough.
as he looked at
Stop
these people.
arguing.
His
Su
tongue
Ping
almost
had no
jumped out
choice
of his
but to
throat.
shout.
He had no
what
idea what
Du
was going
Laolu
on
is
in
my
these
brother's
people's
minds.
I will definitely
Sure
help
enough,
him
he was
this
still
time.
too young.
Everyone helped
These
me think
people
of a
could
way
use
to
stun
defeat
grenades
Tuyu.
to beat drums and pass
After that,
flowers,
everyone
which
quieted
showed that
down,
their brains were
frowning
different
and
from
thinking
ordinary
hard.
people.
Four-way
Shao
heaven
Buddy,
can't
that hole
possibly
is
left
left
for
against
you.
Kismet heaven.
Someone pointed at
Tong
the empty
Lan
hole
snorted.
and laughed out loud.
It's impossible
I
to
don't
win
need
using
it.
normal methods.
Ding Jie didn't
but if
know
you
what
want to
to
use
say.
abnormal methods,
The lady boss
you'll
asked
have
me
to
to
ask
be responsible
Yagwei,
for burying
Shirgan
them.
said with a chuckle.
Then you bury
Su
them.
Ping nodded and
Wait,
said,
this hole
I
is a
think
little
so
small.
too.
I'll
go
change
and
it.
beg Yagwei later.
Mine isn't very
Shirgan thought
comfortable
about
either.
it and said, give me
I'll
the shovel,
with you.
I'll dig a few more
It's best to
times.
send more people.
Ding Jie was dumbfounded as he looked at this group of people changing holes and
Tong Lan, are
continuing
you
to
going?
dig.
Not
They were
going.
burying people alive.
Although Shirjiue
Were
is
they
a little
playing?
pitiful,
Oh.
I don't want to beg him. Are we going to beg Yagwei when he arrives? Su Ping asked. Let's wait until after school. After class, class, Rinpoche returned to his office and sat down. Then he saw a few people rushing in. They were Su Peng Shurgan and 2 girls. Teacher, Du Laolu has been captured and is now locked up at home, Shurgan said. I already knew about it yesterday. Rinpoche looked at everyone and asked, Did you guys come here to tell me about this? Su Peng quickly stepped forward and said, Teacher, please help Du Laolu. Teacher, please help Du Laolu. Du Laolu escaped with Shi Jiue and is now hated by Tuyu. Tuyu will not have a good life if she marries him. Du Laolu has no choice but to challenge Tuyu to a duel in a week. If it's a normal duel, Du Laolu won't be Tuyu's match no matter what. Only you can help him. I can't help you with this matter. Rinpoche shook his head. Teacher. Su Peng was shocked. He originally had high hopes and didn't expect Rinpoche to reject him. Teacher, Du Laolu is a disciple of the academy. He has been studying in the academy for a year. If he can't even beat Tuyu, it won't look good on you, right? Shurgan said with a smile on his face. That's right. Teacher, you have to help them. It will be bad if Shi Jiue marries Tuyu. Teacher,
Can you bear to see your students being separated like this? It's not that I don't want to help, but I can't. Rinpoche shook his head. The marriage was decided by the two Ensure families. Du Laolu and Shi Jiwe eloped because they abandoned their families. I'm your teacher, and what I do is to teach and dispel doubts. When I know that you made a mistake, I will punish you first and make you correct it. Did you do anything wrong in this matter? No, they reap what they sow. That's why I won't help you achieve your goal to defeat someone who has done nothing wrong, even though I know you're wrong. Rinpoche's words made everyone freeze. Therefore, I can't help you with this matter. Rinpoche put down the things, got up, and walked past them. I have some things in the office. If they are lost, all 4 of you will be punished to wash the toilet for a month. After he finished speaking, he didn't care about the others' reactions and went back to the palace with his guards. Tuyu wasn't wrong in this matter, but his mouth was too smelly. What does Yagüe mean? Su Peng was a little stunned. Stupid. He already told you that the things are in the office. However, the 4 of us will be punished to wash the toilet for a month. The smile on Shurgan's face finally disappeared. When was the last time they had to wash the toilet? It seemed to be 2 months ago, and it was no different from yesterday. Didn't he disagree? Why did he leave the things behind? Su Ping didn't understand. If he agreed, it would mean that he interfered. He obviously didn't want to interfere in this matter, but we stole it ourselves, so we can't blame him. He will also punish us. Shurgan said with an ugly expression. He already made up his mind. You can do it yourself. I didn't have to come at all. The other 2 female students were also speechless. Let's wash it then. Su Ping grinned. Hurry up and find where the things are. It must be in a very conspicuous place, such as this box. Shurgan casually opened a box placed in the corner of the room, and sure enough, he saw a bunch of messy things inside. What are these? Do any of you know them? These are flash bombs which were used during the siege of Tianjin Basin. Shurgan took out a few flash bombs and said, No, there's a note on this one that says it's a stun bomb, and this one is a sonic bomb. Then he took out another one that was somewhat different from the flash bomb and said doubtfully, I don't know what this is. Qing Lian, who was walking past the door, saw the things in Shurgan's hands, and her expression suddenly changed. Others couldn't recognize them, but she could recognize them even if they turned into ashes. If possible, she didn't want to see them again in this lifetime. Don't touch those things. Where did you get them? Qing Lian quickly leaned against the window and shouted. Do you know what they are? Shurgan asked. Stink bomb. The Emperor of Great Xia was killed by this thing. Qing Lian said with an ugly expression. The few of them were shocked. Once they heard Qing Lian's words, they knew what they were. This was a great killing weapon. The problem was that this thing was used to perish together with the enemy. There's also this. I remember that many adults wear this. It's sunglasses. It can block out strong light. Let's look again. There might be other useful things. Since we are going to be punished anyway, it's not a loss to take more. There are 2 sticks here. It's written stun baton on them. The bottom of this shoe is full of nails, and a dagger can pop out from the front. Keep them well. We'll take them all away later. Yagüe really doesn't mean what he says. He actually prepared so many things and said that he didn't want to intervene. I knew it. After all, Du Laolu is his student. He can't possibly watch Du Laolu lose. Where's Yagüe's gun? Let's look. Chapter 677. The duel between Du Laolu and Tu Yu was only between the younger generation of the 3 families. The huge gap in strength between the two made the 3 families believe that this duel was just a formality. Even the Du family felt the same way. As a result, no one publicized it or paid attention to it. Even Tu Yu's aunt Tu Wan didn't care. To her, this was just a fight between children. If it wasn't for the elopement of Du Laolu and Shi Jiwe, causing the 3 families to search everywhere, Tu Wan wouldn't have heard of this. However, the day before the duel, the Empress suddenly mentioned this matter and revealed that she wanted to take a look. While many people were puzzled, this matter also caught the attention of many people. The location of the duel was almost changed from a small courtyard to the square in front of the palace. When Rinpoche heard this news, he immediately felt like he was lying in bed and got shot in the knee. If this duel was really held in the square in front of the palace, he would really be the scapegoat. The Empress wouldn't let him off. The big shots wouldn't let him off either. For the next 10 days to half a month, everyone would first have to stand in that overwhelming stench for half a day before going to court, and then go to court with that stench. That scene was simply unimaginable. Can't it be held in front of the palace? What? The Empress was puzzled when she saw Rinpoche's big reaction. No matter what, it can't be. That's simply suicidal. Rinpoche looked solemn. Did you intervene? What did you give him? The Empress asked. No, absolutely not. Rinpoche repeatedly denied. In fact, he was in the wrong in this matter. Why would I intervene in this matter? Although I don't care, this matter was indeed caused by the two of them and they should be punished, the Empress said. Your Majesty, do you still want to go and watch? Didn't you say it intentionally or unintentionally? Seeing that you have this idea, I will go and take a look. In any case, the students in the academy are as weak as you. The Empress raised her pinky finger. Rinpoche saw that this matter couldn't be tolerated and had to prove himself. The brain is the greatest weapon. If we compete in mathematics, physics, and chemistry, I would like to say that there is no one in Dayo who can fight. Well, I understand, the Empress said perfunctorily. And then? Why not in front of the palace? I lost some things. One of them is a skunk bomb. Rinpoche grunted. The Empress turned her head abruptly and sneered, Lost it? Rinpoche replied seriously, It was stolen. The students these days even dare to steal the things I put in my office. I must punish them later. Forget it, I'm not going to watch anymore. Ask them to move the location further away. The Empress shook her head. His Majesty said that he was going to take a look today. It's not good to go back on his words. I feel that the location for the lantern grabbing contest is not bad. It's big enough and has good ventilation. The wind has been blowing from the southeast recently, so there won't be any problems as long as we sit in the wind shelter. Just after noon the next day, Rinpoche accompanied the Empress out of the west gate. There was a large open space in the distance and there were already people waiting there. Most of the 50 students from the academy had arrived. The people from the Du, Tu, and Shi families had also arrived and were sitting not far away from each other. Tu Wan, Tong Jinye, and Shi Qing had also come. Among them, Tu Wan came because her nephew and the Empress was coming. Tong Jinye and Shi Qing came because Tong Lan and Shi Qing were attending classes at the academy. Naturally, they wanted to see how the students from the academy would fight against opponents who were one level higher than them. They might be able to watch a good show. There were also some mid-level and low-level officials who found a place to sit nearby. Most of them were from the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of War, and the Ministry of Appointments. They were old friends with the three families and wanted to see what the Empress cared about in this contest. When they arrived, the Empress lifted the curtain and casually said, I'm just taking a look. You don't have to worry about me. She then drew a card from Rinpoche's hand. He frowned when he saw that there was an ace and a 2 in his hand. Rinpoche looked at the ace in his hand, chuckled, and extended his finger toward the ace in the Empress's hand. However, before his finger could touch it, the Empress's face turned black and her eyes emitted a cold glare. Rinpoche smiled at the Empress. Am I the kind of person who would give up because of a mere threat? Am I that kind of person? Of course I'm going to draw the 2 back. The Empress didn't wait for Rinpoche to retract his hand. She quickly took the remaining ace from his hand and threw it in front of her. I win. This kind of small game naturally can't stump you, Your Majesty. Rinpoche laughed. The Empress then picked up a brush and drew a mustache around Rinpoche's mouth. She nodded and said, This looks much more pleasing to the eye. Rinpoche pinched his chin and said, Sure enough, I look more manly with a mustache. The Empress rolled her eyes at him, looked at the empty court and asked, Why hasn't the contest started yet? It's about to start. Don't be anxious, Your Majesty. Tong Jinye, who wasn't far away, stroked his mustache and gave the Empress a smile that said, Do you think my mustache looks good? The Empress's eyes twitched when she saw this. It's time to go on stage. Rinpoche said. Which direction is the wind blowing? The Empress asked. Rinpoche stretched out his hand to feel the outside of the carriage and smiled. Our position is downwind. Your Majesty, why are you asking which direction is the wind blowing? Tong Jinye was puzzled. Nothing, I was just casually asking, Rinpoche replied. Tong Jinye nodded his head doubtfully and turned to look at the 2 people in the court. They were both 17 or 18 years old, but Tuyu was slightly taller and more muscular than Du Laolu. Du Laolu looked like he weighed only about 100 kilograms, while Tuyu was at least 150 kilograms. From their appearances, they didn't seem to be of the same weight class. Aboriginal men below the cardinal heaven level usually had a stronger physique and a weaker physique. As a result, it was easy to distinguish the difference in strength between them. Tuyu was holding an iron rod that was as thick as one's wrist and weighed more than 50 kilograms. He looked at the tightly wrapped Du Laolu and sneered, "I didn't expect your majesty to come and watch. No matter what, the outcome of this contest has already been decided. This is your last chance, but it's a pity that you can't grasp it and can only struggle in vain. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too useless." It was unknown where Du Laolu got a cloak and wrapped himself up tightly. Only one of his arms was exposed and he was holding a mace. He didn't reply to Tuyu. Instead, he turned to look at the crowd at the side of the court, the students from the academy and Shi Jiwei, who was sandwiched in the middle with red eyes and a worried look on her face. Following which, he turned to look at Tuyu and said, "Even if it's for Jiwei, I have to win even if I have to die." "If it's a contest of eloquence you might really win," Tuyu said sarcastically. "However, eloquence isn't as useful as strength." One of the guards from the Tu family walked to the center of the court. He raised his hand above his head and then waved it down. Immediately, a shallow scratch appeared on the ground, as if it had been cleaved by something. Chapter 678. Tuyu wasn't in a hurry to make his move. Instead, he put his hands behind his back, smirked, looked at Du Laolu and said calmly, "Do you want me to give you a handicap?" "Sure." Du Laolu replied expressionlessly. Tuyu was slightly stunned and couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Ah, good. Aha, you are honest this time." Tuyu was slightly taken aback. Then he couldn't hold back his laughter and said, "Haha, good, haha, you're honest this time." Tuyu wiped the corners of his eyes after laughing as if he had just shed tears. Tuyu laughed, but Du Laoyo's expression didn't change at all. Shurgan and the others were laughing as well. Tuyu laughed, but Du Laoyo's expression didn't change at all. Shurgan and the others were laughing as well. "Let him laugh for a while more. I reckon he won't have a chance to laugh in a while." Su Peng sneered with his arms crossed. "Cleaning toilets for a month just for this scene. It's not worth it." Shurgan laughed halfway, but when he thought of his punishment he couldn't laugh anymore. Tong Lan had gotten a 1-meter-tall tree trunk from somewhere and was swinging her legs on it. She glanced at him and said, "You're a fool." Shurgan's mouth twitched but he didn't reply. A minute later Tuyu saw that Du Laolu was still motionless and said impatiently, "Make your move. What are you waiting for? Don't tell me you're going to keep standing like this?" Can't wait anymore? Are you in a hurry to lose?" Du Laolu sneered. One of his hands was holding a cylinder in his cloak, and the other was hooked onto the ring. "Me? Lose?" Tuyu laughed. "Are you kidding me? It should be this, right?" Du Laolu thought to himself and then exerted some force. With a soft sound he pulled the ring out. He then raised his arm and the cloak unfolded behind him. Everyone then saw what Du Laolu looked like under the cloak. He was wearing a short skirt made of animal skin and had several ropes tied to his body. There were cylinders and other messy things hanging from the ropes. Whoosh! Tong Jingye and Tu Wan immediately turned around and stared at him. "Sir Ren." Tu Wan couldn't help but say, "It has nothing to do with me. Someone must have stolen something that I left in my office. When I get back I will definitely find out who the thief is and punish him severely." Ren Baqin said solemnly as if it really had nothing to do with him. Since Ren Baqin said so, Tu Wan couldn't say anything else. She could only say resentfully, "I hope so." Du Laolu threw the cylinder in his hand at the other party, took off his sunglasses from the rope, and hung them on his face. Tuyu looked at the object flying toward him and said, "Small tricks." However, he took a few steps back. It seemed that he was still a little wary of this unknown thing. However, this vigilance did not make his next encounter any better. Bang! The stun grenade exploded in the air. The sudden appearance of an intense light was like the appearance of a sun. At that moment, everyone felt their vision go white. Apart from the white light they couldn't see anything else. The accompanying loud noise made everyone's heart skip a beat. They had no idea what was going on. After more than 10 seconds, everyone gradually regained their vision and could see everything clearly. Everyone at the sidelines was in such a state, let alone Tuyu. Just now he had been staring at the cylinder. In the end he was blinded by the intense light and the loud noise at close range. He felt as if his head had been hammered and he couldn't hear anything with his ears. The moment he lost his vision and hearing he panicked. However, these aboriginal youths weren't rookies who had never fought before. Even the children of the city officials had sparred with the guards and fought quite a bit. It could be said that every aboriginal youth had rich fighting experience.
After panicking, he immediately retreated frantically and circled around the venue according to his memory. Damn it. As long as I can see again, I can easily defeat him. Tu cursed in his heart as he kept changing his position with his eyes closed. Even though he couldn't see, he was much faster than Du Laolu. Furthermore, the venue was huge, so Du Laolu had to constantly adjust his direction to intercept him. However, the sudden loss of his vision still caused him to stagger a little. This was the scene that everyone saw after they regained their vision. The right move. Many people secretly nodded in their hearts. Then they began to wonder what was going on with the cylinder that suddenly exploded with a strong light and a loud sound. Everyone at the sidelines discussed spiritedly and looked at the Empress's carriage from time to time. After all, this thing was too recognizable. It was basically the right choice to look for Rinpoche for something that they had never seen before. Actually, it has nothing to do with me, Rinpoche said innocently as he sat in the carriage and noticed that everyone was looking at him from time to time. Who do you think will believe you? The Empress asked casually. However, this thing is really useful, especially at night. I brought some back recently. Your Majesty, get someone to send them to Protector Z and General-in-Chief who supports the nation for night attacks, Rinpoche said. These days he would bring back stun grenades whenever he had nothing to do. Currently there were nearly 10,000 of them in Pingle Park, filling up an entire room. All right. The two of them casually chatted and looked at the venue. Du Changkong had finally gotten close to Tu. His muscles bulged as he swung his mace at Tu. Clang. Even though Tu couldn't see or hear it, he could feel the sound of the mace piercing through the air. He immediately raised his iron rod to block the attack. Then he brandished the iron rod that weighed more than 50 kilograms and smashed it in Du Changkong's direction. Like falling rain, every hit of the rod created a pit the size of a wash basin. The soil around him was splashed everywhere. Tu pushed Du Laolu away with a flurry of blows, turned around and ran away without thinking. Once again the scene of Tu running away and Du Laolu chasing after him appeared on the scene. After such a long time, I'm afraid that Tu has regained his sight. It seems like I have to use a gun. Du Laolu thought to himself. Without any hesitation he took out his pistol and pulled the trigger at Tu while chasing after him. Bang! The expected crisp gunshot didn't ring out, and the familiar bullet didn't shoot out either. Instead, a small flame appeared at the muzzle and was extinguished in an instant. Du Laolu was dumbfounded. With a look of disbelief he pulled the trigger again and a small flame appeared at the muzzle again, another press, another spray, another press, another spray. What the F***ck? Du Laolu finally understood. This thing looked like a gun but it wasn't one at all. Not only was Du Laolu dumbfounded but Su Peng Shurgan, and the rest were also dumbfounded. What kind of situation was this? That was a gun, there was no doubt about it. They had often seen Yagüe using it. After all, Yagüe didn't carry the big gun every day. He would often carry a small gun at his waist and use it to shoot people more than once or twice. Why wasn't it working now? The Empress looked at Rinpoche with an embarrassed look and asked, "What's this?" Rinpoche looked at the venue with a pained expression and said, "It's a lighter. They stole the wrong one. I've hidden AP-22. Chapter 679. Rinpoche looked at Du Laolu who was waving his pistol while chasing after Tu, and felt his balls ache. He had clearly hidden AP-22 that wasn't very powerful and was used to educate the students so that they wouldn't be killed easily. Furthermore, he had deliberately hidden it in a very conspicuous place, in a flower pot. However, they actually found the lighter that he had hidden in the corner after playing with it for a few days. Instead, they couldn't find the P-22, which made him a little speechless. Stupid teammates. Rinpoche muttered in his heart. Du Laolu had really found a few stupid teammates. Du Laolu was also dumbfounded. Originally, he didn't dare to try it out because there were too few of them. He thought that since Yagüe had used it more than once, he might as well use it directly. Who knew that it was actually a lighter? Yagüe, why did you hide this thing in the office? You are simply killing me. Du Laolu threw the pistol away with a resentful look on his face. He was determined to go all out. He took out the stink bomb, pulled the ring and threw it at Tu. The stink bomb began to emit white smoke while it was still in the air. A strong, life-doubting stench swept out from the center of the stink bomb. Tu was madly sprinting all the way to take a deep breath of fresh air. This smell, which smelled like 100 tires being burnt together and mixed with 82-years-old feces, suddenly rushed into his nostrils. That stench seemed to have solidified into a giant hammer,
which was constantly hammered on his head and chest by 1,000 gene arm strength, causing him to almost suffocate and see stars in his head. At that moment Tuyu's mind went blank. He fell to the ground in a somersault, rolled 360 degrees on the ground, covered his nose and began to violently retch. Even though Du Laolu was already mentally prepared for this, the moment he smelled the stench, he felt the same as Tuyu. He first felt as if his head was being hit by a sledgehammer, and he began to interrogate himself about the meaning of life. Looking at the white smoke in the air, Tong Jinya's expression suddenly changed, and he disappeared in an instant. He was too familiar with that thing. He and Qin Chuan had thrown that thing under their feet and stood in it for a full hour. The result was mutual destruction. Tu Hong suddenly jumped up from the ground, stared at Rinpoche fiercely and asked, "You actually used poison?" "Don't worry, it's not poisonous." Rinpoche replied nonchalantly as he stretched out his hand to see if there was any change in the wind direction. "Fortunately, the direction of the wind hasn't changed," Rinpoche said. "No poison? What's going on in the field?" Tu Hong asked as he pointed at the field. "If I say it's not poisonous, it's not poisonous. If you don't believe me, you can go in and try," Rinpoche replied. Everyone was puzzled. They felt that Rinpoche wasn't lying. It was impossible for him to lie at this time, but how could they explain this situation? "I have a room rat here. Its sense of smell is extremely sensitive. No poison can escape its detection." Du Laoyo's father waved his hand behind him, and someone immediately untied a cloth bag from his waist. Inside the bag was a palm-sized golden squirrel. The man took out another ball and shook it in front of the rat. The rat immediately showed a covetous expression. Then he threw the ball in the direction of the two, and Room Mouse immediately rushed in that direction. Then it fell to the ground before it was halfway there. "What a powerful poison!" Everyone exclaimed as they shifted their gaze to Rinpoche's face. Not only could this room rat distinguish between various poisons, but it also had a high resistance to poison. Ordinary poisons had no effect on it. However, it actually fell to the ground at this time. It was obvious that the field wasn't only poisoned, but it was also extremely powerful. "Rinpoche, you still dare to say that it's not poisonous?" Tu Hong called Rinpoche's name with a fierce look. If he wasn't still in the Empress's carriage, he would have rushed up and fought with Rinpoche. Even Du Laoyo's father's face changed. "It's indeed not poisonous." Rinpoche was also a little speechless. "Sir Tu, please say it." "It should be not poisonous," Tuan said. She had roughly guessed what was going on. "It's indeed not poisonous." Tong Jingye had returned with a sad look on his face. "The room rat is moving," someone shouted. The room rat lay on the ground for a while, twitched twice, then suddenly turned around and rushed toward the crowd. Its pair of round eyes were full of tears and they fell drop by drop. When Room Rat returned to the Du family, the faces of the Du family members changed drastically. Their faces turned black. At this moment the two people in the field moved again. "Du Laolu, how dare you use such a sinister trick? I'm going to kill you." Tuyu regained his vision, got up from the ground, and lunged at Du Laolu while howling. Du Laoyo's face twitched as he took out another stun grenade. "Tuyu, what do you think this is? Do you think I can fall for the same trick a second time? I'm going to kill you." Tuyu covered his eyes with one hand and stood rooted to the ground. After waiting for a long time he didn't hear the loud bang. He immediately put down his hand and looked forward. He saw Du Laolu holding a mace in one hand and a black rod the size of an arm in the other. The cylinder was gone. "Are you bluffing?" Tuyu's face turned ashen. The stench was constantly stimulating his brain, making him even more irritable as he strode toward Du Laolu. However, Du Laolu suddenly retreated. Bang! The ground where Du Laolu had just been standing suddenly erupted with the same intense light that shone on Tuyu. Once again Tuyu couldn't see anything but a vast expanse of whiteness. "At least he has some brains," Rinpoche praised. Everyone clearly saw that when Tuyu covered his eyes, Du Laolu placed the stun grenade under his feet and stepped on the handle. As he stepped back, his feet left his original position, and the stun grenade exploded. "Don't panic. Although I can't see it, I can feel the wind brought by the mace. I'm faster than him, and as long as he attacks again I can finish him off with one strike. Even if it's an exchange of blows, I can seriously injure him with one strike." Tuyu suppressed the growing anger in his heart and forced himself to calm down. He had made up his mind to finish off his opponent even if he had to exchange blows with him. However, this time, Du Laolu didn't rush forward to attack like he did previously. Instead, he circled around Tuyu twice from a few meters away before quietly approaching him like a thief. It's useless. As long as he wields his weapon, Tuyu will be able to feel the wind. I'm sure that's what Tuyu is thinking, the surrounding crowd said. However, unexpectedly, Du Laolu didn't have the slightest intention of wielding his weapon. Instead, he slowly extended the black rod in his left hand toward the metal rod in Tuyu's hand. What's he trying to do? Everyone was puzzled. Something is touching the metal rod. To the right. Tuyu suddenly sensed that something was amiss and revealed a sinister smile. This time he absolutely couldn't let him escape. Zzz. The rod in Du Lao's hand emitted a blue light, and an electric current passed through the metal rod to Tuyu's body. Tuyu's whole body started to tremble as if he had epilepsy. Idiot, I know you're waiting for me. Du Laolu sneered. However, the metal rod isn't a person, so your senses are slower. Furthermore, the metal rod conducts electricity. Seeing that Tuyu had fallen to the ground, Du Laolu was a little worried and poked Tuyu's body a few more times. Clang. Du Laolu casually threw the mace on the ground and turned to look at the crowd at the side of the arena. His face revealed an ecstatic expression. I won. I won. I won. Most of the people at the side of the arena were at a loss and in disbelief. They didn't know what had happened and couldn't believe that the battle had ended just like that. Today's battle had been inexplicable from start to end. That kid from the Du family was clearly a Four Directions Heaven expert. How exactly had he defeated Tuyu? Why did both of them stop just now? If it wasn't poison, then what was it? What was that black rod? Why did Tuyu's iron rod fall to the ground the moment it came into contact with it? What exactly happened? Who could explain this? Du Laolu dashed toward Shirjiua. Jiua, I won. Shirjiua's face was filled with disbelief and ecstasy at first. Just as she was about to throw herself into Du Lao's arms, she suddenly froze. Under everyone's gaze, she turned around and ran away. Ran away. Ran away. Renbachien stood up from the carriage, walked to the edge of the carriage and looked at everyone. He coughed to attract everyone's attention before saying, During this duel, someone stole something from my office and gave it to Du Laolu. I will go back to investigate and punish the culprit severely. Chief Ren, what exactly happened? Most people weren't concerned about what Renbachien had lost. They were concerned about something else. How could Four-Way Heaven defeat Kismet Heaven? One must know that the difference in strength between the two was like heaven and earth. However, this battle had started with a dumbfounded expression and ended with a dumbfounded expression. Just like that, the Four-Way Heaven had inexplicably won. Chapter 680. Here, I want to ask you a question. What's the biggest difference between humans and beasts? Renbachien jumped down from the Empress's carriage and raised his voice in response to everyone's doubts. Language? Emotions? Or words? Everyone was stunned to hear this. Although they didn't know what Renbachien was talking about had to do with the battle just now, they couldn't help but wonder what the difference was between humans and beasts. It seemed that very few people had considered this simple question. Wasn't language, emotion, and words just a part of what Renbachien was talking about? No, let me tell you that the biggest difference between humans and beasts is that humans use their brains and tools instead of relying on their instincts and sharp claws. Since our ancestors learned to use fire, humans have taken a completely different path from beasts. Since our ancestors learned to tie knots and record things, they have passed down the knowledge that needs to be passed down from generation to generation so that we can stand on the shoulders of our ancestors and pass on our wisdom. And this competition has shown the value of tools. A Four-Way Heaven expert can defeat a Kismet Heaven expert with a few small things. Although this isn't absolute, it has a very important meaning. What exactly are those things? Someone asked. Tools. Renbachien said resolutely. Some very cheap things. Renbachien walked a few steps away from Du Laolu and stopped. I'll deal with you later. First, throw those things to me. Renbachien frowned as he caught the two stinky stun grenades that Du Laolu threw at him. He held them between his fingers and showed them to everyone. These are stun grenades. They're very simple things that can be made from ammonium and magnesium, which can be found in plants and soil. In other words, plants and soil can be turned into these things after some processing, and they're very cheap. How cheap are they? If the process is up to standard, one can be made for a few dozen copper coins. As for the effect, you should have seen it. Even a Kismet Heaven expert will lose his vision and hearing for a short period of time at close range. Reaching the Kismet Heaven level at the age of 20 can be considered pretty talented. However, an ordinary person can make 10 or 100 of these things in a day. They can make 10 or 100 people lose their vision and hearing for a short period of time and be at the mercy of others. Without the use of weapons and tools, how many ordinary people could defeat a Kismet Heaven expert? 100 people? 1,000 people? This difference in the number of people is brought about by the tools. As for the key to Du Lao's victory, apart from the stun grenade, it was the stun baton, which is a tool that specializes in storing electricity. That's right, it's those lightning bolts that you've seen and feared. As long as there was a suitable method, this lightning could be used as a tool. Not only can it be used as a weapon, but it can also be used for other purposes. Needless to say, you will probably see it in a few days. What I want to say is that creating tools requires knowledge and culture. This is the original intention of my establishment of the Academy, to allow the descendants of the Aboriginals to learn this knowledge. Not for the sake of collecting trash. The Academy is not a garbage shelter, but a starting point to change everything. Perhaps to all of you, Du Lao is just a martial arts cripple. You can ignore him and look down on him. Rinpoche turned to the Du, Shi, and Tu families. However, to me, Du Lao and the students in the Academy are the future of Dayo. They represent the height of Dayo's future. This is the reason why I'm here and explaining all of this to all of you. Rinpoche's voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the surroundings. Everyone was bewildered. Rinpoche's words had a huge impact on them and simply broke the values that they had always held. Yagwei is so manly today. The surrounding students clenched their fists tightly after hearing Rinpoche's words. No one had ever made them feel so valued before, and no one had ever held them in such high regard. In front of so many people, the phrase, "the future of Dayo," really stirred up their emotions. Du Lao, who was standing in the crowd, also looked excited. Everyone's facial expressions fluctuated. They had always wanted to deny Rinpoche's words, but they didn't know how to refute him. The scene that just happened proved the persuasiveness of Rinpoche's words. These two beliefs were fighting endlessly in their hearts. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out, "I don't believe it." Everyone turned their heads and saw a burly man walking out of the crowd with a gloomy face. It was Tuyu's father, Tu Hong. In this world, strength is the only foundation. Our ancestors used strength to snatch a way out of the mouths of the beast. We use strength to conquer Dayo in this world. I only believe in my own strength. Tu Hong said word by word. At this time, there were many people who had the same idea as him. No one was willing to be directly denied the foundation that they had relied on for so many years, but they didn't say it out loud. When Tu Hong stood up, there were many people who echoed his sentiments. Strength. That's right. Force is part of strength, but brains and tools are also part of strength. All of you only saw his martial prowess and nothing else, Rinpoche said unhurriedly. Those are all heretics. Take the Yun nation for example. No matter how prosperous the heretics are, they are still vulnerable to the blades of Dayo's warriors. Very narrow-minded thinking, but it's not incomprehensible. In that case, do you want to compete with me? Let's see if these heretics are really as vulnerable as you think. Let's see if they are really as strong as you think. Rinpoche tilted his head and smiled. Regardless of whether the other party was resentful about Tuyu's defeat or had other thoughts, Rinpoche felt that he should let everyone know the power of technology. After coming to this world for so long, he had seen many experts and had a good understanding of the strength of a Cardinal Heaven expert. Even after seeing this scene with their own eyes, there were still people who objected. Rinpoche decided to take this opportunity to completely change their minds. A man-wheel expert defeating a Cardinal Heaven expert should be shocking enough. It should let them understand that strength didn't just come from themselves. As soon as Rinpoche finished speaking, everyone around him gasped. Rinpoche was only a man-wheel expert, which was equivalent to a four-way heaven expert from the Aboriginals. On the other hand, although Tu Hong had just crossed the threshold of a Cardinal Heaven expert, he was still a Cardinal Heaven expert. There was a difference of 2 levels between the two. It wasn't even enough to describe the difference between a baby and a strong man. He was simply crazy. A Cardinal Heaven expert wasn't a Kismet Heaven expert. Before Rinpoche could take out those things or even react, the battle might already be over. Chapter 681. Are you serious? An ominous glint flashed in Tu Hong's eyes. Are you looking down on me by challenging me? An ordinary person challenging me, a Cardinal Heaven expert? Do you think I'm made of clay? Tong Jingya and Tu Wan's expressions changed slightly. Rinpoche was too bold. He actually challenged a Cardinal Heaven expert to a duel. Was he really that confident in his stuff? Yes, but I don't want to fight anymore. It's not suitable for me. The simplest one is that you win as long as you can catch me. How about that? However, you have to hang a piece of iron on your body first. Rinpoche smiled and said meaningfully, "How heavy can a piece of iron be? Are you trying to use this to slow me down?" Tu Hong sneered. "It's just a piece of iron. If you can catch me, then you win. Otherwise you lose." Rinpoche said, "I promise you. What do you want to bet on?" Tu Hong glanced at the Empress, but she didn't respond. Since the Empress wasn't going to step forward, he would let the other party know what the words Cardinal Heaven meant. The little things that he relied on were completely vulnerable in the face of real strength. "I'm not betting on anything. Let's just fight for the victory," Rinpoche said faintly. "Are you afraid of losing?" Tu Hong sneered. "I'm afraid that your family won't be able to survive if you lose." Rinpoche chuckled. "Apart from some land and some gold and silver from looting the Hao Nation and the Yun Nation, what else did the Aboriginal officials have?" Rinpoche wasn't looking down on them, but they were really poor. They couldn't even compare to a rich merchant, let alone the aristocratic officials of Great Xia and the Yun Nation. "Do you think I will lose?" Tu Hong bent down slightly and stared at Rinpoche. "In any case, I don't think you will win." Rinpoche spread out his hands and looked down at his palms. "I have calculated with my fingers that an auspicious day will be in 3 days. As for the location, let's still do it here. The time limit for the competition is 30 minutes. If you can't even touch the corner of my clothes in this arena, then there's no point in continuing," Rinpoche said. "I don't need 30 minutes, just 30 minutes." Tu Hong raised his hands, spread his fingers, and then clenched them into fists. At that moment, Rinpoche seemed to have heard the sound of air exploding. 10 breaths is enough." Tu Hong repeated fiercely. "Let's wait and see. See you in 3 days." Rinpoche smiled. He stretched out his palm and pressed it on his temple before swinging it forward. This was an irregular Wuxia military salute. Although the surrounding people didn't know what it meant, the students of the academy felt that it was very cool. On the way back to the city with the Empress suddenly said, "Even though the technology in your world is very advanced, I still feel that individual strength is the most important. It should be said that they are all very important. How could I not know the value of personal strength? It was just that they all focused on that one point and treated their personal strength as everything. I just want to show them that other things can also be powerful." "What are your plans?" the Empress asked. She didn't think that Rinpoche was going to lose to his opponent. "You're not going to use poison or stink bombs, are you?" Poison aside, although the stink bomb was disgusting, that was all it was. If the same level of strength was used all of a sudden, it could indeed disturb the opponent, throw them into confusion, and then take the opportunity to win. If the difference between the two sides is too great, it would be useless, the Empress said. "How can that be?" "It's not like I don't know the strength of a Cardinal Heaven expert. Even though I don't understand it very clearly, I have a general idea of the situation. A spirit wheel expert's strength was about 3,000 kilograms, and an Aboriginal Cardinal Heaven expert's strength was at least 4,000 kilograms. Of course, the bigger problem was speed. For a Cardinal Heaven expert, they could reach a speed of 100 meters in 1 second, so fast that ordinary people couldn't even react. I'm very clear about this." Rinpoche looked at the Empress and smiled. "Are you going to use poison?" the Empress asked first. "Of course not. That would lose the fun." Rinpoche looked at the confused Empress and laughed. "I think it will be very interesting. Your Majesty, do you want to make a bet with me?" The Empress leaned against the animal skin and adjusted her posture to make herself more comfortable. She then revealed a languid expression and asked, "What do you want to bet with me?" "Your Majesty, how about wearing a bikini?" As soon as Rinpoche said this, he felt a chill from the Empress. Since it's a bet, shouldn't it be bigger? Moreover, bikinis are considered normal clothing on Earth. "Didn't your Majesty see it?" Rinpoche replied nonchalantly. "It's normal for them, but I don't like it. If you win, I'll kiss you. If you lose," the Empress said casually, "I'll kiss you." Rinpoche immediately said. The Empress spat at him lightly. "If you lose? Oh, I really have to think about it. There doesn't seem to be much that I want." "Forget it. If you lose, promise me one thing." "As for what it is, I'll tell you when the time comes," the Empress said after some thought. "I'll do as you say, Your Majesty." Rinpoche laughed. "Lose? No way." After Rinpoche and the Empress left, there were still many people who stayed behind and whispered to each other. The most excited people were the students of the academy, who gathered together to celebrate Du Lao's victory. However, they cautiously stood at the upper hand and maintained a distance of 20 meters. Well done, I finally have a whole new level of respect for you today. I didn't expect you to actually win. I'm a little surprised. Skipping levels. This is skipping levels and you actually beat Tuyu? Ah. One had to know that Du Lao's competition wasn't as simple as him winning or losing. Instead, it gave hope to those students who were considered trash in the academy. Through this battle, they could see their future value, unlike before when they didn't know where to go. Although Yagüe had said this many times, it wasn't as direct as this battle. If you do it again, I'll beat you to death. Suddenly, a voice was heard along with a strong stench and everyone dispersed. No one knew when Tuyu had been lusted over by someone. It was obvious that he still couldn't move and was completely relying on the support of others. At this moment, he was staring fiercely at Du Laolu with bloodshot eyes. Losing to a four-way heaven wastrel was a great humiliation that he had never imagined in his life. He could imagine that he would become a laughingstock when he returned. Do you dare to compete again? Tuyu's eyes were red. You have nothing to lose now. Du Laolu stared at him without giving in. Furthermore, the next match is between your father and Yagüe. When the time comes, we'll be waiting to see the two family lose again. Dream on. Is that person worthy? Don't you know what a cardinal heaven expert means? My father will tear apart all the trash that you rely on, Tuyu said with an ashen face. We'll wait and see. Du Laolu laughed. Although a cardinal heaven expert is very powerful, I just defeated a Kismet heaven expert. It doesn't seem as strong as I thought. You? Tuyu roared, if you do it again I'll definitely kill you. Du Laolu couldn't be bothered with him anymore. He turned around and chased after the students. Hey, wait for me. Hey, don't run so fast. Why are you hiding so far away? Chapter 682. As everyone returned to the city, the news of Du Laolu defeating Tuyu with his four-way heaven strength, as well as the duel between Ren Baqian and Tu Hong, spread to the ears of the officials in Lan City. Like a stone thrown into a calm lake, it set off a ripple. A four-way heaven defeating a Kismet heaven was something that had not happened in many years. It was already shocking enough. A match between a four-way heaven expert and a cardinal heaven expert had never happened before. No matter how one looked at it, there was no comparison between the two. A cardinal heaven martialist could kill a bunch of four-way heaven ordinary people with a flick of his finger, let alone in a competition. Even the winged cavalry warriors and the people from the Ministry of Works, who had dealt with him many times, felt that this news wasn't real. This was too fake. When did he become so arrogant? Even if they were only competing in speed. If it was a competition of mathematics or something else, everyone believed that Baqian would win. In terms of speed and strength, even 100 Rinbakians couldn't compare to one hand of a cardinal heaven expert. At this time, the people who believed in him the most were the students in the academy. After all, he had learned a lot in the academy and knew that he had all kinds of strange things. As a result, he trusted him very much. This was because he represented their future. Do you think Yagüe can win? After school, many students were discussing in the school. Even Du Laolu won. Yagüe shouldn't lose, right? But that's a cardinal heaven expert. Yagüe has more thoughts than anyone else. Since he dares to bet, he definitely won't lose. I thought so too, but I heard them talking about Yagüe the past 2 days. None of them are optimistic about him. Who cares about them? Even we don't know what Yagüe is capable of, let alone them. What can they know? If Yagüe wins, it will definitely be beyond their expectations. I can't wait to see their expressions. Someone started a bet. Yagüe will win 1 to 10. I've bet all my assets on this. Who organized it? Hong Xian, White Tiger, Lu Royao and the rest. Those fellows aren't the same as us. I'd like to see them lose all their pants. I still have 22 taels of silver. I'll give it to you when I get back. Help me put it all in. 3 days passed in a flash. At the same time on the 4th day, Ren Baqian and the Empress arrived at the same place that they were at 3 days ago. Although there were quite a few people watching the competition 3 days ago, they were sparse in such a large venue. This time, it could be said that all the officials in Lan City who had nothing to do were here. They were all officials and their family members. Everyone wanted to see how Ren Baqian dared to compete with Tu Hong, who was a cardinal heaven expert. One had to know that Tuyu's defeat had caused him to lose face. Not only was his engagement annulled as promised, but he had also become a laughingstock in the city due to his loss to the four-way heaven. This time even Tu Hong's face was on the table. If he lost again, the entire Tu family would become a laughingstock. Even Tu Wan wouldn't look good. Therefore, no matter what, he would not go easy on them. Therefore, everyone wanted to see this match with their own eyes. The first elder, the junior elder, the ministers of the 6 ministries, the various ministers, and the officials were all present. In a corner at the edge of the venue, a group of young men and women gathered together and joked, "Young Sparrowhawk, you really put in a lot of money. Not only did you act as the banker, but you also bet 300 taels of silver on that person's loss. How could I let go of such a good opportunity to make money?" Lu Royale smiled happily. There was nothing more delightful than watching one's enemy lose and making money at the same time. Haven't you realized it after so long? That person isn't a fool. He's much smarter than most of us, Hong Xian said faintly. Otherwise he wouldn't be sitting in that position with such a low level of strength. Humph, I don't know what Her Majesty sees in him, right? Lu Royale was a little unconvinced. You underestimate Her Majesty. Although I'm not smart, I know not to underestimate Her Majesty's foresight. Another burly man said in a muffled voice. Young Sparrowhawk, although my grandfather didn't say it, I can see that he thinks highly of him. You are blinded by hatred. Hong Xian's words made many people tremble in fear. Did Hong Wu think highly of Rinpoche? Tu Yu stood nearby with no one beside him. When he heard Hong Xian's words, his face turned exceptionally ugly. Just you wait. We won't lose this time. Your Majesty. Everyone stood up and bowed. Sit down. The Empress appeared in a flash on a chair that had been prepared for her. She rested her chin on one hand and waited for the competition to begin. When Rinpoche walked past the crowd, many people gasped in surprise. Many people felt a suction force, causing their weapons to become restless. What's going on? This suction force disappeared in a flash, but many people still found the source. It was in a box carried by one of the guards behind Rinpoche. The box was huge and 2 meters tall. Even 2 people couldn't wrap their arms around it. The outside was made of wood and no one knew what was inside. It seemed to be something that Rinpoche had prepared for this competition. As the guard entered the arena, everyone felt the suction force disappear. Those who were attentive would notice that there was no metal on the guard's body. Even the weapon that never left his body wasn't hanging on his waist. Tu Hong was already waiting in the arena. When Rinpoche was 10 meters away from him, he said, "As I said before, you have to put a piece of metal on your body." Of course, I will also put a piece of metal on my body. We actually have the same idea. If you can catch me within 30 minutes, you win. Is it in the box behind you? Give it to me. I will let you know that your little tricks are useless against real strength, Tu Hong said as he looked at the box behind Rinpoche. An earth wheel expert could carry that box, let alone Rinpoche himself. Furthermore, judging from the trembling of the guard's footsteps, the box didn't seem heavy. Let's wait and see. Rinpoche still said the same words. He turned around and pulled out a box from the top of the box. Following which, his face immediately became extremely strange, and his hands couldn't help but shake. Take the box away, Rinpoche whispered. The guard quickly took the box away, and Rinpoche's face gradually relaxed as he wiped the sweat off his forehead. After placing the box on the ground, Rinpoche took out a metal hoop that was only slightly thicker than a person's waist. However, it was as thick as an arm and seemed to only weigh about 50 kilograms. This is it. Put it on your waist. Rinpoche walked slowly to Tu Hong with the box in his hand. Tu Hong was a little puzzled as this thing was really too small. He originally thought that Rinpoche was using a heavy object to slow down his movements, but how big was this thing? Only a few kilograms? Furthermore, when he took it, he realized that it was lighter than he expected. It was at most 10 kilograms. If it leaves your body, you lose, Rinpoche said again. Humph. Tu Hong snorted coldly as he took the hoop and put it from his feet to his waist. It was slightly big, but there were some airbags inside the hoop. Rinpoche stretched out his hand and the airbags filled the gap. The hoop was like a belt that was securely fastened to his waist. All right, before you lose, do you have anything else to say? Rinpoche asked with a relaxed smile on his face when he saw that he had put on the bracelet. Me? Lose? Ha 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 ha. Tu Hong suddenly burst into laughter when he heard Rinpoche's words. You actually said that I will lose? I can't wait any longer. After laughing, Tu Hong lowered his head slightly and stared fiercely at Rinpoche. He grinned and revealed his snow-white teeth like a wild beast. I can't wait to let you know that the thing you rely on is so weak and shatter that inexplicable self-confidence of yours. I will let you know what true strength is. Chapter 683. Rinpoche took out another box from the bottom of the box. Inside the box were 2 dark-colored belts and a battery. This belt was an electromagnet. For safety reasons, Tu Hong wore a ring made of strong magnets while Rinpoche wore 2 belts made of electromagnets. After the 2 belts were electrified, one of them repelled the strong magnetic ring on Tu Hong's body, while the other one attracted each other. In fact, the most frightening thing about this competition was that the repulsive and attractive magnetic fields would change due to the difference in height. For example, if Tu Hong jumped above Rinpoche's head, Rinpoche could adjust his posture and switch belts in the opposite direction. At the same time, 2 wires were connected to the belts. They were 2 remote controls, and the left and right hands each controlled the opening and closing of a circuit. After getting everything ready, Rinpoche turned on the electric current of the repulsive magnetic belt, turned to look at the Empress, raised his right fist and gave her a thumbs up. Begin. Xanja stepped forward, and her cold voice spread throughout the arena. Tu Hong took 3 steps forward unhurriedly. When he took the 3rd step, Rinpoche felt as if the air was squeezing forward and forcing him to take a step back. At this time, the distance between the two was still 10 meters. This was the repulsive effect of the electric current at its maximum. However, in the eyes of others, it seemed as if Rinpoche was oppressed by Tu Hong's imposing manner and subconsciously took a step back. Tu Hong stopped and gave Rinpoche a ferocious smile. Aren't you going to take this opportunity to escape? I've said that I only need 10 breaths to catch you. If you don't escape, I won't even need 10 breaths. At this distance, I can catch you with just 1 hand. Rinpoche put 1 hand behind his back, straightened his back, and tried his best to pose like a grandmaster. He stretched out his other hand and beckoned Tu Hong, "Come." Tu Hong was a little puzzled. Where did his confidence come from? He was standing so close to Rinpoche and didn't have any other equipment on his body. What gave him the confidence to do so? Although he was puzzled, it didn't affect his movements at all. He stomped on the ground and a fist-sized pit was blasted open. In an instant he rushed out at an extremely high speed. In the eyes of those who were weaker, it seemed as if he had disappeared. However, he wasn't the only one who disappeared. Rinpoche also disappeared at the same time. At the moment when Tu Hong rushed over, Rinpoche flew backward like a baseball that had been hit. In a flash, Tu Hong appeared at the place where Rinpoche had been standing. Rinpoche was sent flying more than 30 meters away and only managed to stabilize himself after taking a few steps back. The crowd in the distance burst into an uproar. How is this possible? How can he be so fast? His speed is about the same as Lord Tu's. Tu Hong looked at him, took a deep breath and said, "I didn't expect you to be able to do it so quickly. But this is as far as you can go. How many times can you use this speed?" As for the repulsive force that landed on his body when he knocked Rinpoche away, he almost didn't feel it at all. That was close, I almost fell. Fortunately, I'm considered a man-wheel expert now. It would be embarrassing if I fell if I suddenly lost my balance and was sent flying so far away, Rinpoche thought to himself. Then he straightened his body, put 1 hand behind his back, and walked a few steps around Tu Hong with the demeanor of a grandmaster. Then he stood still and waved at Tu Hong. "Come. Let's see how many times you can dodge." Tu Hong shouted coldly. The soil under his feet exploded again, and he instantly crossed more than 30 meters and appeared at the place where Rinpoche was standing. However, in the eyes of everyone, Rinpoche's speed wasn't inferior at all. He retreated more than 10 meters at almost the same speed as Tu Hong, but this time he was in a more difficult situation and almost fell to the ground. He flipped backward and took a few steps back before stabilizing himself. I want to see whether you retreat faster or I chase faster." Tu Hong laughed and gave chase again. However, Rinpoche appeared more than 10 meters away at the same time. Tu Hong didn't stop and rushed out again the moment he landed. Rinpoche was sent flying again. One of them chased while the other retreated. In the blink of an eye they had retreated more than 200 meters. Tu Hong stood on the ground with an ominous glint in his eyes. It was obvious that Rinpoche was in such a difficult situation that he couldn't even stand steadily, but the moment he chased after him, he would retreat again as if he wasn't affected at all. He even chased after Rinpoche before he landed the last 2 times. However, Rinpoche actually retreated more than 10 meters in the air. How was this possible? I have a whole new level of respect for Yagüe, Tonglan exclaimed as she took out a lollipop from somewhere and put it in her mouth. This lollipop was given to her by the Empress when she entered the palace, but she couldn't bear to eat it. Well, there were many people around today so she could eat it. He's indeed powerful, especially when he lost his balance in the air and suddenly retreated. I can't tell how he did it. Even a Cardinal Heaven expert can't do such a thing. Shurgan was also full of admiration. Not only them but the people around them also exclaimed in admiration. Under such circumstances, even a Cardinal Heaven expert of the same level couldn't do better than Rinpoche. When one lost their balance in the air, even a Cardinal Heaven expert would find it difficult to exert force and would need to adjust their body. However, Rinpoche rolled in the air and suddenly retreated. This simply refreshed everyone's understanding. Not to mention the most important point was that Rinpoche had been retreating toward Tu Hong from the beginning to the end. I don't believe that I can't catch you. Tu Hong growled in a low voice. Rinpoche's buttocks bounced up after landing as if he was skipping on water. He was actually standing very steadily and didn't let anyone see how miserable he was. He was obviously panicking when he was in the air just now. After stabilizing himself, Rinpoche saw that Tu Hong was about to charge at him again and suddenly stopped him. Wait a minute. What? Tu Hong asked coldly. The sunlight is very dazzling from this angle. Rinpoche placed his hand on his forehead and looked up at the sky. Tu Hong's face immediately turned black. I'll change my direction. Rinpoche circled around Tu Hong and was quite satisfied with his back facing the sunlight. He was even more satisfied that he could finally change his angle and wouldn't be pushed against the city wall. In fact, the magnetic field was curved. As long as he could adjust his angle in time, he could be squeezed away like a ball instead of being sent flying in a straight line. However, the other party was too fast. Other than changing his direction for the first time, he didn't have the opportunity to adjust his angle again. Alright, come on. Rinpoche straightened his body again and waved his hand. At this point in time, Tu Hong didn't mention about the 10 breaths that he had mentioned just now. Including the time that Rinpoche had swayed half a circle, 90 seconds had actually passed. However, not only did he not manage to catch the corner of Rinpoche's clothes, he didn't even manage to close the distance between them. The closest distance between them was 40 steps at the start. How could Tu Hong accept this? The next moment he suddenly jumped toward Rinpoche's head. Rinpoche only felt a repulsive force that pushed him backward and almost made him tumble. Then, that repulsive force turned into a suction force and Tu Hong, who was in the air, and Rinpoche, who was on the ground, were actually sucked toward each other. Tu Hong stretched out his palm in the air and grabbed Rinpoche. In addition, Rinpoche was pulled into the air by the magnetic force and couldn't resist at all. It was as if he was being sucked toward Tu Hong's palm. What kind of technique is this? The crowd in the distance had been in a state of shock when they saw Tu Hong trying to close the distance between them but failing. At this time, they were all dumbfounded when they saw this unforeseen event. There was even a technique that sucked people toward it. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.